Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mindy Morgenstern. Mindy Morgenstern was born on April 29, 1984 in Bogota, Colombia. She was adopted by Eunice and Larry Morganstern, farmers from New Salem, North Dakota, USA, who already had a biological daughter named Rebecca. They had previously adopted a boy named Michael, and then, 10 years later, they adopted April, also from Colombia. When they discovered April had a younger sister, Mindy, they adopted her as well, making her their fourth child and third adopted child. Growing up on the farm was ideal for Mindy. She enjoyed horseback riding, playing basketball, and helping her parents with farm work, including driving a tractor. After graduating from high school, Mindy left New Salem and moved to Valley City, where she thrived in student life. Her outgoing and cheerful personality quickly helped her make many new friends. Mindy was a dedicated student who balanced her studies with a part-time job as a waitress at a local restaurant. It seemed like she was on the verge of achieving her goals, but her life took a devastating turn. Mindy's friends and family noticed that she was unreachable on September 13, 2006, which was unusual because she was always quick to respond to calls and messages. Concerned about her whereabouts, her friends Tony and Danielle decided to visit her apartment to check on her. When they arrived, they saw her car parked in the lot, which indicated that she was likely at home. Danielle waited in the car while Tony went up to Mindy's second-floor apartment. Despite knocking on the door, there was no response. Tony entered the dark apartment, stumbled upon a disturbing sight, and turned on the light to reveal Mindy's body with neck injuries. Overcome with shock, Tony ran outside to inform Danielle, still waiting in the car. Mindy's friends entered her apartment, but they were met with a disturbing scene. Mindy's neck had knife wounds, and an empty bottle of cleaning agent lay nearby, its strong smell permeating the air. Danielle quickly called 911 to report the discovery of her friend's body. As they waited for help to arrive, a neighbor from the same floor, who had been alerted by the noise, came to investigate. He approached Mindy, checked her pulse, and sadly announced that she had passed away. Soon after, the police arrived at the apartment. Upon entering, the detectives were immediately struck by the overpowering smell of the cleaning agent. They found Mindy's body lying in the living room, with a belt wrapped around her neck and a broken knife protruding from it. The handle of the murder weapon was found next to Mindy's body. In an attempt to destroy evidence, the killer used a cleaning agent, but forensic experts still managed to find crucial evidence, including skin particles under Mindy's left-hand fingernails, indicating that she fought back against her attacker. As investigators searched for a motive, they quickly dismissed the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Mindy's purse, phone, wallet, and cash were all still present, untouched, and her jewelry remained unaffected. It seemed that the attacker's intentions were not financially driven. The presence of a basket of clean laundry near Mindy's body suggested that she was attacked immediately after entering her apartment. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry on the front door, implying that the killer either knew Mindy or entered the apartment shortly after she did. The next day, the detectives informed the Morgenstern family that Mindy had passed away. The news brought grief to her parents, brother, and sisters. The family was confused, as Mindy was well-liked by everyone and had no known enemies. Her friends had no history of trouble with the law. Mindy's friends, Tony and Danielle, revealed to investigators that they were not alone in the apartment. A neighbor from the same floor had entered Mindy's apartment after hearing their screams. He attempted to check Mindy's pulse, pronouncing her dead. When questioned, the neighbor explained that he had used the back of his hand to avoid leaving his fingerprints on Mindy's wrist. When questioned about the scratches, Robert Lind claimed they were work-related injuries, explaining that his job working with steel often left him with scratches. He said he had been at work from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. the previous day. The investigators verified his alibi by contacting his employer, who confirmed Robert's schedule and explained that scratches were a common occupational hazard. Despite this, the investigators remained skeptical and asked Robert to provide a DNA sample, which he willingly supplied. To aid in their investigation, the police sent a sample to the lab to compare it with the one found under Mindy's fingernails. They also questioned all of Mindy's friends, but no leads came from these interviews. Everyone claimed that Mindy didn't have any conflicts with anyone. While waiting for DNA results, investigators questioned Mindy's neighbors, including Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer from Barnes County Jail, hoping his professional insight might reveal something others missed. Gibbs claimed to have served in the Navy from 1990 to 1999, but was discharged due to an assault conviction and prison sentence. After release, he had no further legal issues. A former college security guard, Gibbs worked the night shift before Mindy's death. Next morning, Gibbs packed boxes into the car, preparing to move with his family. He noticed a strong smell of cleaning agent, but didn't investigate, being too busy with the move. Mo Gibbs had scratches on his hands, which he attributed to carrying boxes. When questioned about visiting Mindy Morgenstern's apartment, he claimed to have been there only once to help her carry a laundry basket. Investigators requested a DNA sample from Gibbs, which he readily provided. After collecting the sample, the police released Gibbs. They then spoke with Mindy's co-workers at the restaurant where she worked, seeking information about anyone who might have known her well. They discovered that a frequent visitor, Ralph, who lived in a nearby trailer, made Mindy uneasy. The police decided to question Ralph, who denied knowing Mindy or having any conflicts with anyone at the restaurant. Ralph didn't have a solid alibi, but he did provide a DNA sample, which was sent to the lab for analysis along with the other evidence. The detectives then turned their attention to Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan Ram. Like Mindy, Jordan came from a local farming family, and they had been together for over a year. They met at church, where they were regular attendees. Jordan had a clean record and was well liked in the community. He appeared to be deeply committed to Mindy, often taking her to spend time with his family. However, Mindy's parents mentioned that Jordan would sometimes show up at their farm uninvited, asking Mindy to leave with him. This behavior hinted at jealousy, but Eunice and Larry didn't think he was capable of harming their daughter. The police asked Jordan to come in for questioning, and he readily agreed. During the interview, Jordan cooperated fully and answered questions honestly, trying to help the investigators in any way he could. Jordan claimed to have seen Mindy the day before she died, when they went shopping and visited a video rental store. The next day, Mindy called him at 10:45 a.m., which was the day she died. This was unusual because Mindy normally called Jordan around 10 times a day, but on this day, she didn't call again or respond to his attempts to reach out. Jordan told the police about his whereabouts at the time of Mindy's death, saying he was working on his family's farm. He agreed to provide a DNA sample and take a polygraph test, but his results were inconclusive due to his anxiety. The police let him go and sent his DNA sample to the lab while they checked his alibi. However, Jordan wasn't the only person in Mindy's life who raised suspicions. Kyle Kia, Mindy's ex-boyfriend, was another potential suspect. They had broken up over a year before her death, but something strange happened after their breakup. Kyle was the love of Mindy's life, and they had been together for 2.5 years. Kyle's family had loved him, and Mindy thought she would marry him one day. After their breakup, Kyle moved to a new place about an hour away from Valley City. Mindy was worried that Kyle would find someone else, which led to their breakup. According to Kyle, he ended the relationship because he needed to move on with his life. Mindy tried to win him back, but Kyle had already started seeing someone else and stopped communicating with her. About 7 months before her death, Mindy visited Kyle's house to talk, but he told her to leave. They hadn't spoken since then. When questioned by investigators, Kyle expressed regret over how he had treated Mindy. Kyle also revealed that Mindy had been in touch with his father, Rodney Kia, which was unusual. Mindy's friends said Rodney would call her several times a day, sometimes just a few times a week. Kyle thought his father was too attached to Mindy and had even asked him to stop contacting her. Rodney's wife was upset about the situation, as he was married. The police found a voicemail message from Rodney on Mindy's phone, left after her death, in which he apologized and cried. The police found the close relationship between Rodney and Mindy suspicious and brought him in for questioning. Rodney admitted his attachment to Mindy was strange, triggered when she dated Kyle and reminded him of his young wife. They started talking about Kyle, then discussed other topics, frequently texting even after his wife found out. Mindy often initiated conversations, sometimes up to 20 times a week. Rodney, who considered Mindy like a daughter, was shocked when he heard about her tragic fate. He left an emotional voicemail for the investigators, which, although sincere, didn't dispel their suspicions. In fact, it's possible that he became obsessively fixated on her. Despite his denials, Rodney provided his DNA to the police and accounted for his whereabouts on the day of Mindy's death, claiming he worked on the farm with his 2 sons from 7:30 a.m. until evening. His family corroborated his alibi, and the investigators released him. Meanwhile, the police sent his DNA sample to the lab for comparison with the skin particles found under Mindy's fingernails. Just as the investigation seemed stalled, a DNA analysis revealed a connection to a similar attack that had occurred in Fargo, 75 miles away, 2 years prior. In that case, a woman had been attacked and forced to make contact with her assailant. The DNA sample from the Fargo case matched the one found under Mindy's fingernails, suggesting that the same perpetrator was responsible for both crimes. The police investigating Mindy's case met with the Fargo victim to gather more information about her attacker. She recounted being drugged at a bar, waking up in an unfamiliar apartment, and barely escaping her attacker. She described him as a muscular African-American man, over 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. The police had previously entered the attacker's DNA into the federal database, but it had gone unmatched for 2 years. Now, with the new connection, they had a lead. After analyzing multiple DNA samples, the lab finally found a match: 34-year-old Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail, who had voluntarily provided his DNA sample. Detectives called Gibbs in for questioning, keeping him under surveillance in case he tried to flee. At the police station, they asked him to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to, but the results indicated he was lying. Gibbs denied any involvement in Mindy's death, remaining calm even after learning his DNA linked him to the case. However, the evidence was enough to arrest him and charge him with Mindy's murder. After Gibbs's arrest, 5 female prisoners came forward, accusing him of forcing them into intimate relations while he was on duty. As a result, he faced 6 additional charges. It was discovered that Gibbs had changed his name, previously being Glendale Morgan Jr. while serving in the Navy. He had been involved in a drive-by shooting and spent over 5 years in prison. Gibbs pleaded guilty to all charges except those related to Mindy's death. His defense claimed that his DNA was under Mindy's fingernails because she touched the same door handle as him, but the prosecution believed he entered her apartment, forced her into intimacy, and then killed her when she resisted. The judge deemed the evidence against Gibbs to be overwhelming and sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Gibbs also received additional sentences of 12 years for assault and 15 years for related charges. Although Mindy's mother publicly forgave Gibbs, she made it clear that she would never forget what he did to her daughter. Gibbs is currently serving his sentence at the North Dakota State Penitentiary. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ronell Burns. Kiana was born on September 15, 1977, in St. Louis, Missouri. After graduating from Riverview Garden High School, she attended St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she studied cosmetology. She soon turned her passion into a successful business, opening her own beauty salon, which became popular thanks to her hard work and dedication. Over the next 20 years, Kiana's salon grew to become one of the largest in the St. Louis area, a testament to her persistence and entrepreneurial spirit. However, her personal life was not without its challenges. Despite her success, Kiana struggled to find a suitable partner until she met her future husband, Ronell Burns, at the age of 44. Prior to meeting Ronell, Kiana had 3 children from previous relationships, whom she loved deeply. Her family and friends describe her as a loving mother, supportive friend, and accomplished businesswoman. Ronell Burns was born on May 14, 1975, in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from the High School of Fashion in 1994, where he excelled in basketball and competed for a state championship. Ronell was driven, ambitious, and passionate about competition, always striving for greatness. Before meeting Kiana, Ronell had 2 children from a previous relationship. When they met, they brought together their strong work ethics and ambition, creating a new, happy family. On September 13, 2012, Ronell and Kiana got married in a beautiful wedding surrounded by relatives and friends. After the wedding, Kiana discovered a new side of Ronell. It turned out that Ronell had dedicated his life to Jesus Christ at a young age and wanted to serve the Lord. He began helping anyone he could, including people he met on the street. Ronell even created a website where he coached and preached to spread his message. Ronell believed that God spoke to him in his early years, instructing him to help others. He interpreted one of these calls to mean that sometimes God chooses to communicate with everyone, and only He can allow certain events to occur in life. Ronell pursued his ministry, and his video messages gained immense popularity online. In addition to his impactful work as a church coach, Ronell was a financial counselor and insurance agent. He founded Traditional Financial Solutions, a company dedicated to helping people worldwide achieve financial independence. Ronell achieved great success in his business and humanitarian efforts, and his speeches drew large crowds. His wife, Kiana, supported him, and together they gained popularity online. Ronell was already well established as a leader and coach in the 6-Figure Ambition program, an online initiative for entrepreneurs. He had a substantial following on social media, with over 7,000 fond followers on Instagram and 2,000 subscribers on his educational YouTube channel. By combining their business skills and family values, Ronell and Kiana Burns created something remarkable that positively impacted thousands of people. Kiana was a motivational speaker who shared her insights on success at business events. She also had a strong online presence, with 14,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted about her family life and inspiring quotes. In a popular video message, Kiana and her partner appeared dressed in luxury brands, talking about the benefits of entrepreneurship on their lives and those of their thousands of subscribers. The couple emphasized that their goal is to teach their audience how to become successful entrepreneurs and build a solid business foundation. They urged young entrepreneurs to stop wasting their hard-earned money and instead invest it wisely to generate passive income. Their message concluded with the belief that anyone can achieve greatness, not by being great from the start, but by taking the first step towards it. In the Burns family, only Kiana has achieved the success that Ronell often talks about. She has worked hard to build and operate a network of salons on her own, and was also a successful insurance agent. Her business generated most of the family's income. Ronell, on the other hand, focused on projecting an image of wealth, often posting photos of the family in expensive clothes and at fancy restaurants. Meanwhile, the wealthy and successful individuals took action, while poor people were drawn to the Burns family's enticing stories of making big money without effort. Ronell received a lot of attention from outsiders because everyone wants to become rich. He eventually founded a company with ambitious 6-figure goals, allowing him to continue building his wealth and creating his own legacy. which he frequently boasted about in interviews. The Burns had built a close-knit family unit, and to outsiders it seemed like they were living the perfect life. Ronell and Kiana, both successful in their careers, were inspirations to many, and their children, Rhea, Makai, and Ray Haley, were a big part of their lives. However, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Ronell suggested that Kiana leave her hometown of St. Louis and move to Atlanta, a decision that didn't sit well with her. Despite their 3 children together, Kiana was forced to make the move as Ronell had plans to expand their business. Kiana put on a brave face and pretended to be happy with the decision, but deep down, she was reluctant to leave St. Louis. On social media, she presented a perfect picture of her life, posting photos of the luxurious gifts she received from Ronell, such as a Maserati Levant car and her collection of Louis Vuitton bags. She would accompany these posts with captions expressing her gratitude and admiration for her husband. Like many social media influencers, Kiana also frequently posted about her family and children, painting a rosy picture of her life. Kiana, a woman who appeared to have a perfect life, revealed to her audience that everything wasn't as smooth as it seemed. In reality, she and her partner were on the brink of divorce after moving to Atlanta. This left Kiana alone in a new city, where she had to start from scratch. In a heartfelt video message, Kiana opened up to her subscribers about the challenges she faced when deciding to move and adapt to a new home and people. She emphasized that adjusting to new environments and people without the support of loved ones can be incredibly tough. Kiana also shared her struggles with mental health, expressing concerns about not being strong enough to overcome life's challenges. However, the question remains, was the move to Atlanta the primary reason for the imbalance in her family, or were there other underlying factors at play? In a speech, Kiana refused to mention that the real reason for the problems in their relationship was Ronell's infidelity and promiscuity, which he had kept hidden from their seemingly perfect life on social media. Later that night, Kiana posted a video of herself happily dancing at home with one of her daughters. However, a few hours later, the situation took a tragic turn. Kiana and Ronell got into a long and intense argument, which ended with Kiana grabbing a gun, shooting Ronell, and then herself. By the time the police arrived, neighbors had already gathered outside the Burns' home, reporting that they had heard gunshots coming from inside. The investigation initially suggested that Ronell Burns had taken his own life. But the discovery of Kiana's body in the next room with a gun in her hand revealed that she was the one who had made the fatal decision. While it was clear that Kiana had killed her husband, some people believed that she had been driven to do so after discovering his infidelity. Others thought that the couple's severe debt and Ronell's con artist tendencies had led to the tragic event. As people dug deeper into the couple's lives, they uncovered some revealing information from Ronell's ex-wife. She disclosed that during their divorce, she had learned that Ronell was a habitual cheater and had been reckless with her finances, leading to a ruined credit history and failed jobs. Ronell had then met Kiana, a successful career woman who was drawn to his confidence and charisma. Ronell, in turn, was attracted to Kiana's wealth, and the two seemed like a winning combination. However, their business ventures ultimately failed, leaving only Kiana's beauty salon intact. Despite this, Ronell continued to pretend to be a successful businessman, convincing others of his non-existent achievements. The Burns family presented a false image on social media, showcasing lavish purchases and happy relationships to conceal their severe financial struggles. Ronell posted about his business ventures, claiming he could turn any idea into a profitable success. Behind the facade of a devout Christian couple, they shared Bible quotes and scripture in their posts. They flaunted their luxurious lifestyle, posting photos of their homes, parties, and vacations, creating an illusion of wealth. However, this was all a ruse to hide their true circumstances. Unbeknownst to their followers, Ronell worked for a fraudulent American marketing insurance company that preyed on middle and lower-income families, exploiting them for financial gain. He even tried to recruit his own family and friends to join the scheme, seeking to boost his status. Despite his efforts, Ronald failed to generate enough income from the company and struggled to support himself. The Burns couple pretended to be prosperous entrepreneurs, convincing those around them of their success and even creating a TV show, Meet the Burns, to showcase their supposedly lavish lifestyle. However, their arrogance blinded them to their financial reality, and they spent all their earnings on luxuries, trying to be someone they were not. This reckless spending ultimately led to their downfall and bankruptcy. On December 19, 2019, Kiana and Ronell Burns officially filed for bankruptcy and had to sell some of their assets to pay their debts. Despite their financial troubles, Ronell and Kiana continued to present a false image of a happy family and successful business. But it became increasingly difficult to maintain this facade in St. Louis. Ronell, seeking to further his fraudulent activities, convinced his family to relocation to a larger city. This decision would prove to be yet another mistake. Despite their thriving business being their sole source of income, Kiana reluctantly agreed to the move. However, Kiana struggled to adjust to life in Atlanta. She was already aware of Ronell's repeated infidelities and had grown tired of her patient and silent nature. The couple jointly decided to divorce, but in the divorce papers filed on October 10, 2021, Ronell deceitfully cited Kiana's infidelity as the reason. Devastated, Kiana understood Ronell's motives were to maintain his public image, as their friends and family were unaware of the couple's troubles. Ronell sought to conceal the truth from the public, but on October 20th, 10 days after the divorce filing, Kiana publicly addressed a serious matter on live TV, her usual bright smile replaced by a concerned and sorrowful expression. After divorcing his first wife, Ronald Burns remarried a successful and wealthy woman named Kiana, adopting the persona of a devout guru to hide his true nature. He continued to exploit his new wife's trust and wealth, pretending to be a successful businessman. However, their seemingly perfect marriage was a facade. On November 9, 2021, Kiana shot and killed her husband Ronell before taking her own life. The Sandy Springs Police Department reported that no one else was present at the time of the incident. The tragic event left 8 children without parents. Despite the shocking turn of events, there was no record of domestic violence at their Atlanta home. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Kiana had asked her Facebook friends to pray for her, hinting at deeper struggles. The exact reasons behind her actions remain unknown. It's difficult to judge someone's decisions when they are struggling with depression and other mental health issues. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that 8 children are now left without parents, forced to navigate the world on their own. News of Ronald Burns and his wife Kiana's passing has spread quickly through their large social circle. Their deaths have been widely shared on social media, with many friends and acquaintances expressing sadness and sharing stories about the couple. Even those closest to them have paid tribute, although one friend's post revealed that few people knew the truth about the family until the end. Ronald Burns was known for flaunting his wealth and success, which often masks insecurity. He became so convinced of his own importance that he lost sight of reality. He ruined the lives of multiple successful women, misleading them with false promises of happiness and success. People like him have no self-respect or dignity. He's a con artist who preyed on his wives, deceiving them with fairy tales of eternal love and happiness. Unfortunately, he was able to manipulate them by playing on their emotions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel. Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel, born on August 12, 1998 in Madrid, came from a wealthy and close-knit family. Her parents, Diana Cristina Lopez Pinel and Juan Carlos, had a sister named Valeria. However, their family life was disrupted in 2013 when her parents divorced, leading to depression and competition between the sisters for their mother's attention. Despite the divorce, their father remained involved in their lives and would visit them regularly during vacations. Diana, her mother, and sister often spent their summers in the small coastal town of Poder do Carmo, which had a population of around 10,000. In the summer of 2016, they returned to their favorite vacation spot, Alba do Carmo, to enjoy the peace and beauty of the area. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Valinclan Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. It seemed like it would be just another typical summer evening. Diana regularly walked in Valinclan Park, which was close to her family's cottage. Her mother saw no problem with this and let her go there again. That evening, Diana had a good time with her friends, unaware that it would be their last encounter. After saying goodbye to her friends, she met Paso Diana Ariel, an acquaintance, near a pizzeria she often visited. They parted ways around 2:30 a.m., making Paso Diana Ariel the last person to see Diana that night. The morning of August 22, 2016, was a nightmare for Diana's mother, Maria Care Lopez Pinel. When Diana didn't return from a party, her mother became alarmed. The girl's phone was off or out of range, and her prolonged absence was unusual. Based on the information Diana's mother provided, it seemed that Diana didn't have any significant emotional or mental health issues, despite experiencing her parents' divorce. Maria immediately reported her daughter missing to the police at 8:30 a.m. Police investigated the mysterious disappearance of Diana Maria Care Lopez Pinel. Diana, also known as Diana, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic clues. The last messages she sent were to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp, in which she described being stalked by a stranger who would shout strange phrases, frightening her. These messages were her final contact with the outside world. To retrace Diana's steps, the police searched the road she would have taken to get home. Along the way, they found a black hairband, similar to the one Diana wore that night. Unfortunately, it was the only clue found at the scene of her disappearance. Investigators had no other leads, despite questioning Diana's friends, who couldn't provide any helpful information. The lack of CCTV cameras on the last part of Diana's journey made it even more challenging. The dimly lit and deserted street had few landmarks, including some garages and a rundown Boomerang nightclub. Some witnesses reported seeing Diana exit a car with 3 men, then get into another car that drove her away from the port. However, these accounts were not corroborated. Investigators explored 2 main theories. First, that Diana was kidnapped by someone she knew, and second, that she was attacked by a stranger. Diana's mother even proposed a third possibility, that her daughter was taken away on a boat. Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend claimed that she met a man from Morocco and they purchased hashish together. However, this information only added to the mystery of her disappearance. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore that evening were found, but her mother denied this, stating that no such discovery was made. Furthermore, Diana left her credit card and identification behind, which suggested that she did not intentionally run away. This, along with other circumstances, indicated that her disappearance was not voluntary. Diana's disappearance remained a mystery despite efforts to solve it. The media soon revealed that Diana had argued with her mother just before she vanished, which led to reports of Diana having a nervous breakdown and requiring medical attention. Her younger sister Valeria, 16, was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid further conflict and litigation, the father was granted custody of Valeria. This decision was made on September 1st to prevent more tension in the community, which was already on edge due to Diana's disappearance. The father and daughter left town, fueling rumors that they were hiding something important. According to Diana's friends, it was not unusual for the sisters to run away from home, especially Valeria. The family had complicated relationships with frequent quarrels between the mother and daughters. Diana's mother was criticized for being overly anxious when Diana failed to return home, considering Diana had often left home on Wednesdays without incident. However, the family's actions raised suspicions when they canceled a scheduled press interview, citing emotional distress at the possibility of never seeing their daughter again. New information emerged on September 11th, contradicting the mother's claim that Diana didn't have mental health issues. It was revealed that Diana had gone missing for 3 days in April, and her mother had not reported it to the police. Diana would often turn off her phone to upset her mother, and had expressed a desire to no longer live with her. The letters exchanged between Diana and Valeria, published in the press, revealed that both sisters struggled with serious emotional issues. Valeria's problems were severe enough to land her in the hospital multiple times in the past year, including an incident where she had to have her stomach pumped due to a prescription drug overdose. With the investigation into Diana's disappearance stalled, prosecutors have shifted their focus to investigate the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the Lopez Panel family. Meanwhile, the search for Diana continues at full speed, with investigators working intensively to uncover the truth about her disappearance. Forensic experts analyzed various items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription drugs, but found no leads. They also questioned her acquaintances, such as a Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with, but, again, no conclusive results. Despite extensive searches in the surrounding areas, the investigation remained stagnant. The search efforts focused on the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes near the disappearance site, but Diana's phone signal was last detected in the Tarragon area, 13 miles away from her family's location, around 3 a.m. on the night of her disappearance. 72 days passed with no resolution, and all leads remained unconfirmed. However, the police did find a phone matching Diana's, which her father confirmed belonged to her. In a surprising twist, Diana's Facebook profile was activated 2 months after her disappearance, prompting friends and relatives to notify the police and provide screenshots. The Remind Password function had been used to bypass entering profile login details, leading to 2 possible explanations. Diana might have forgotten her password, or an attacker was attempting to access her profile. Unfortunately, Diana's phone, which could have held crucial clues, failed to provide any insights into her mysterious disappearance. On November 10, 2006, investigators finally identified the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen. Significantly, this individual had a prior record of human trafficking charges. However, details about his potential involvement in Diana's disappearance were kept under wraps to avoid jeopardizing the ongoing investigation. A pivotal incident occurred on December 25, 2017. A girl was accosted by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. The frightened victim screamed for help, and a passing couple rushed to her aid, rescuing her from the assailant who tried to drag her into a car. After the victim reported the incident to the police, providing a description of the attacker and their license plate number, officers arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abinay, also known as Elo, the next morning. A background check revealed that Abinay had a prior criminal record and a surprising connection to a previous case. He was the same driver detained in 2016 for suspicion of kidnapping Diana Kerr, but was released due to his wife's alibi. Further questioning of Abinay and his wife led to a breakthrough. The wife confessed to previously lying, stating that her husband was not at home on the night of Diana's disappearance and did not return until 4 a.m. Under pressure, Abinay finally admitted to accidentally hitting Diana with his vehicle and fearing the consequences, disposing of her body rather than reporting the incident to the police. Jose's original story changed when he confessed to kidnapping and murdering Diana. He claimed that he went to the beach to collect gasoline from abandoned cars and came across Diana there. Jose kidnapped Diana, attempted to sexually assault her, and eventually strangled her. Diana Kerr's disappearance was a long and distressing ordeal for her family and those who followed the case. The nearly 500-day investigation, accompanied by relentless media speculation only added to her loved one's suffering. The unfounded accusations against Diana's parents further complicated and hindered the investigation. Nevertheless, through diligent investigation and the testimony of a second victim, investigators gathered sufficient evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana will be fondly remembered by her loved ones as a vibrant and lively young woman who tragically crossed paths with a violent criminal. Her story highlights the importance of unity in combating crime, ending impunity, and ensuring the safety of all citizens. Unfortunately, Diana's body was hidden by the perpetrator, who refused to disclose its location for a long time. Eventually, after much effort from family and friends, they were finally able to locate her remains in an abandoned warehouse's well in January 2018. This allowed them to give Diana a proper farewell and burial. As for the perpetrator, Jose, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Smith family. George, from a happy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, grew up with his father's liquor store as a central part of his life. After studying business at Babson College, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst, but his true passion remained the family business. So, he eventually returned home to learn the ins and outs of the store from his father. In 2002, George met Jennifer, also from Connecticut, at a friend's reunion. Jennifer had just started her teaching career as an elementary school teacher. The couple fell deeply in love, and George's parents were overjoyed with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. They got married at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, with the ocean as a stunning backdrop. The honeymoon cruise that followed was meant to be a relaxing and joyful experience. However, it turned out to be a mysterious and frightening journey that filled them with uncertainty. George and Jennifer met Josh, a 20-year-old from California, and another couple on a cruise ship. Josh quickly became friends with George, and on July 1st, the group decided to spend the day together on land when the ship reached the Italian coast. They had an amazing time exploring the island, trying local food, and creating unforgettable memories. That evening, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the ship and decided to have a fun night, enjoying appetizers and drinks before heading to the casino. George and Josh played craps while Jennifer played poker. Although they lost a significant amount of money, they didn't regret it, joking that it was part of their honeymoon. The last time George was seen on video was leaving the casino around 2:30 a.m. Tragedy struck on the morning of July 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos. George, 26, vanished. The ship's captain searched the cabin where strange footprints were found, as well as the deck, but George was nowhere to be found. The available evidence suggested that something serious had happened, possibly involving violence. The news spread quickly, causing alarm among the passengers. Deck 7 was sealed off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. After discovering blood, it was assumed that George and Jennifer had mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge of the investigation, searching their stateroom for clues. One possibility was that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found where she was having a pre-booked massage. She seemed surprised and concerned, claiming to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she hadn't seen him since the previous night. She revealed that when she woke up that morning, her husband wasn't there. But she didn't search for him, assuming he was with friends or in another cabin. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation, and the ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers, expressing hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police investigation into George Smith's disappearance began with his wife Jennifer, who was agitated and seemingly unaware of her husband's whereabouts. She told them that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had come to her door, saying George might have fallen overboard. Traces of blood were found on the boat's awning, suggesting something terrible had happened. The investigators focused on cabin, which was in disarray, with signs of a possible struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators discovered 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, which were identified as George's blood. All evidence pointed to George being harmed inside the cabin before he vanished mysteriously. A chair on the balcony had been moved, suggesting someone had sat there, which raised suspicions that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and blood on the awning and inside the cabin also hinted at a possible murder. The investigators started to reconstruct the events of that night, trying to figure out who George was with and what led to the tragedy. They questioned the group of young men who had spent time with the newlyweds the previous night. The men revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol, and they had helped him back to his cabin, where they put him to bed and left him alone. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd, but video footage showed Jennifer stumbling away at 3:30 a.m., leaving George with her new friends. Lloyd's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., contradicting Josh's account. The investigation continued, with each new detail adding more mystery to the story. It was discovered that Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old with Russian roots, had been part of the group that night. He had met Jennifer in the casino, and they had gambled together until late. The group then headed to the disco, where they continued to drink and dance. As the night wore on, the group members began to disperse to their cabins, but not before they were visibly drunk and rowdy. The events of the night became increasingly unclear, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. After the cruise ship staff refused to serve 2 intoxicated visitors, Josh and his friends remembered they had brought a bottle of absinthe from the island of Mykonos. However, crew and passengers were not allowed to consume their own alcohol on board. Josh went to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe from his cabin, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%. George hid the bottle in his shorts to avoid detection. Around 3 a.m., when the ship was quiet, a janitor caught the group, including Josh, George, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, drinking the absinthe. This incident became a key part of the investigation. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively sober, began to stagger and eventually leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Her behavior was misinterpreted by some witnesses, who thought she was either trying to keep her balance or flirting. Later, Jennifer got into a conflict with her husband George, which ended with her hitting him. It was unclear whether this was done in a playful or angry manner. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., stumbling and visibly intoxicated. The janitor, who had previously noticed the group drinking absinthe, helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right, although her stateroom was on the left. Later, Jennifer was found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock showed 4:52 a.m., but George was not present. The curtains on the balcony doors were tightly closed, despite the breeze. This raised questions about George's whereabouts. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, who were staying in a neighboring cabin, reported hearing a noise on their floor around 4 a.m. They heard loud noises from the newlyweds' stateroom, followed by brief silence, loud talking, and an argument on the balcony. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. He then saw 3 unknown men outside the cabin, but did not see George or Jennifer. Several passengers reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the ship's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the witnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. The investigation raised questions about whether one of the men who entered the cabin might have stayed behind to steal from the newlyweds. the key card records confirm that George and his friends entered his stateroom at 4:05 a.m., according to their testimony, but there is no record of them re-entering the cabin afterwards. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. One theory is that George was the victim of a robbery. George and his wife Jennifer had been drinking heavily that night, and by 3:30 a.m., they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting they may have been drugged. Witnesses claimed that George and Jennifer had large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings, and that they wore expensive jewelry, including a Breitling watch and an engagement ring. It's possible that their quarters were turned over, and the traces of blood on the sheet could have come from an attempt to remove George's watch. Another theory is that George's death was related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain suggested that George might have had an accidental fall while drunk, and experts noted that absinthe could cause hallucinations in high concentrations. However, the absinthe George and Jennifer purchased was bought officially in Europe, and experts believe it was unlikely to cause hallucinations. The FBI investigation into George's disappearance involved interviewing several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, who both passed polygraph tests. Josh Askin failed his polygraph test, which may indicate that he was hiding something, but it could also be due to the interrogation tactics used. A videotape showing 3 men, including Russians, joking about George's disappearance was found, with one of them saying, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which could be a hint about what happened to George. In 2009, 4 men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin, were interviewed by the FBI as witnesses. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers, citing the Fifth Amendment, and their testimony remained ambiguous. The George Smith investigation was influenced by Greg Rosenberg's testimony, who claimed that he and others ordered food to their cabin that night, which would have provided an alibi for the Russian men. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as ship records do not support the order, and the cabin's delivery service was blocked the day before. Furthermore, the staff was instructed not to provide service to them that night. Greg Rosenberg's account of the relationship between George and Jennifer was also unclear, as he claimed it was difficult to determine due to heavy alcohol consumption. He emphasized that everyone in the group was highly intoxicated, making it impossible to draw conclusions about their relationship. However, there are contradictions in Greg's testimony, as Josh Askin stated that Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions added complexity to the investigation, requiring further verification and fact-finding. Greg claimed that he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but believed that the event was not accidental. He hinted that something significant happened that night that would eventually be revealed. Sadly, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in 2019, and his death remains unsolved, with police investigating a possible link between his murder and George's death. The Smith family persisted in demanding the truth and justice, but their efforts yielded little results. They offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to those responsible and called for a boycott of the ship owner's company, which they believed was covering up the incident. The family's relationship with Jennifer became strained as her behavior seemed suspicious, and her reluctance to share information raised concerns. She claimed to be following FBI instructions, but her decision to accept a $1 million settlement from the cruise company led the Smith family to lose faith in her and suspect that she was hiding something. The Smith family was disappointed with the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They believed that she was not showing the proper interest in finding out what happened to George. Jennifer claimed to remember little from that night after 2:30 a.m. and was not aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, leading them to seek the help of independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted further studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. The investigation into George Smith's disappearance aimed to determine whether his death was a murder or an accident. Henry Lee, an expert, suggested that the balcony's height made it uncertain whether George died from a fall, and alternative scenarios, such as being pushed by someone or being in a state of insanity, could not be ruled out. Lee planned to simulate a fall from the balcony using a dummy to gather more evidence, but the cruise liner's owner refused to allow it. This decision raised suspicions among George's relatives, who believed it was an attempt to conceal the truth. The FBI conducted their own investigation, focusing on the 4 men who spent the night with George, including Josh Assen and 3 Russians. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the confusion. Despite the lengthy investigation and multiple theories, the truth behind George's disappearance remains unknown. His family continues to seek answers, suspecting foul play and initially pointing fingers at Jennifer, his new wife. However, they eventually cleared her of suspicion and received a payout from the cruise company. The family used the payout to secure the release of the investigation results, including witness statements and other evidence. Jennifer, now exonerated, dedicated herself to charity work in George's memory. Years later, Jennifer remarried, but the case remains unsolved. The FBI closed the investigation due to lack of evidence, ruling George's death an accident. The mystery surrounding his disappearance continues to haunt his family, who are still searching for the truth and a sense of closure. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of John Thomas McGuire. Life in an orphanage is difficult and unpredictable. You have no personal space, no control over your time, and if you're not able to stand up for yourself, you're likely to be bullied by the older kids. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure, however, were a little more fortunate because they had each other. With 2 of them, they were more able to defend themselves. The sisters preferred to keep to themselves and didn't try to make friends with anyone else. They were hopeful that their stay in the orphanage would be short-lived. They believed that their mother would soon find out that their father, Larry McClure, was in prison and that she would come to take them away. It was impossible to keep their father's imprisonment a secret. The news was all over TV and in the newspapers for a long time. As time passed, days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Unfortunately, it became clear that they might not be returning home anytime soon. One day, the sisters intervened to protect a new girl, Meredith, from being bullied. Meredith had a difficult past, having lived with a mother who was addicted to drugs. She was very thin, scared, and would jump at the slightest noise. After her mother died of an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and ended up in the orphanage. Amanda and Anna Marie kept the reason for their presence a secret, brushing it off when Meredith asked about it with a fabricated story about a policeman father who died in the line of duty. However, the truth eventually emerged that their father was not a deceased police officer, but a living criminal serving time in prison for violent sexual crimes against a young girl. This revelation made their lives a living hell. Luckily, the sisters soon got a second chance when 2 separate families adopted them almost simultaneously, allowing them to start anew. Unfortunately, this meant they would be separated and lose touch with each other. There is no information available about the sisters' experiences in their foster homes. What is known is that Amanda, 29 at the time, met her future husband, John McGuire, now 38. Her adoptive parents had worried that Amanda would remain single forever, given her lack of biological family and the emotional trauma of her mother's betrayal. Larry McClure, the father, was released on parole and returned to Virginia, where he lived in a mobile home. He was determined to reconnect with his daughters. First, he visited Amanda's foster parents, Guam and Alex, and introduced himself, asking to see Amanda and requesting her contact information. At the time, Larry was dishonest about Anna Marie's whereabouts, claiming she lived in North Carolina, 186 miles away, when in fact, he had never seen or spoken to her. Despite this, Larry was able to meet with Amanda, and their reunions eventually led to him introducing her and her friend John to illegal drugs that he manufactured in his camper. The tragic events unfolded on Valentine's Day. John, who was still recovering from the effects of drug abuse and was deeply in love with Amanda, decided to surprise her with a romantic evening at home. However, during the meal, John's affectionate words to Amanda made Larry extremely anxious, causing tension to build. Larry stopped his son-in-law John from speaking and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife Amanda. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. John's legs were tied, and he was asked to answer all questions about his life truthfully. At first, the questions were harmless, but as Larry became more intoxicated, he started accusing John of being an undercover FBI agent. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To keep their relationship a secret, Larry changed his name. The new family decided to start fresh in Kentucky, vowing to quit illegal substances for good. To blend in with their neighbors, they even hung a U.S. flag on their rented house's door. By 2019, John's family, including his ex-wife and parents, had become worried because they hadn't heard from him. John's mother even went so far as to file a missing person report with the police. Meanwhile, Larry was in trouble with the law again. He had failed to notify the authorities that he had moved to a different state, which violated the terms of his probation. As a result, he was sent back to prison. Larry's mental state had deteriorated significantly due to his long history of substance abuse and mixing drugs with alcohol. Suddenly finding himself in a place where he couldn't access these substances triggered withdrawal symptoms, including increased anxiety and a blurred sense of reality. It's likely that this led him to make irrational decisions, such as marrying his own daughter. Larry became convinced that the real reason for his parole violation was to search for John's body, which he believed was buried in his backyard. He urgently needed to get a message to his daughters, Plaudard, Amanda, or Anna Marie, to dig up the body parts and rebury them in a different location. However, all prison calls are monitored, so he had to find a way to convey this information discreetly. Larry meticulously prepared a speech, considering every detail, but was prohibited from making any phone calls. Despite this, he eventually couldn't resist and confessed to the duty officer, although his intentions remain unclear. Larry's reasoning was that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty, and if he implicated his daughters, that would be even better. However, the officer was initially skeptical, wondering what Larry was talking about. Why would this addict incriminate himself? Nevertheless, the officer was required by law to investigate Larry's claims. Initially, the officer intended to perform a cursory verification, simply confirming that a statement had been made and the alleged crime scene had been checked, but finding nothing. However, it was discovered that John was indeed missing, and as a precaution, a police unit was sent to Larry's residence. Upon searching the area, they found traces of lime, just as Larry had mentioned, and soon every aspect of his confession was corroborated. The McClure sisters were promptly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were stunned when their father and husband, Larry, confessed to a brutal murder. Their shock turned to disbelief when Larry tried to shift the blame, testifying that his daughters were responsible for the crime and he was an unwitting participant. As the family's story unraveled, each member attempted to distance themselves from the crime, claiming it was an accident. John's relatives were especially grief-stricken, as they had to come to terms with the fact that his body was never found, only remains. These remains had to be retrieved from forensic experts and transported to his parents for burial in a closed coffin. Despite the challenges, John's parents were able to lay him to rest, thanks to the help of friends who contributed financially assisted with transportation, and made funeral arrangements. John was finally laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted a message on John's Facebook page, pretending it was from him. The message said he was going on a trip and would be out of touch for a long time, and asked his friends not to worry about his extended absence. This was a tactic to mislead everyone, as the family knew they were about to kill John and didn't want to arouse suspicion. Despite the heinous nature of their crime, during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their incestuous marriage, which is illegal in their state. The trial began, and Larry was given the floor. He stated that he had felt remorse for his own children for most of his life. He admitted that when they were very young, he had committed a serious crime that put them in an orphanage. He explained that their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one who had a heartache for his little ones. He expressed his extreme gratitude to the people who had adopted his babies. He said he would not hide, and even attended churches and prayed for their adoptive parents when he got out. He confessed that he had crazily wanted to make up for all the years he had missed. He confessed that he could have walked away from the crime if he had convinced Amanda not to do it, but he didn't. He admitted that the judge and jury would probably not understand him, and he shared their point of view, but emphasized that they weren't in his shoes. He mentioned that John was a fine young man and expressed his regret for John. He stated that if he could, he would turn things around, but no one could raise the dead, and he couldn't say no to Amanda, his favorite and youngest daughter, who didn't care about John. All Amanda wanted was to be able to withdraw government money from John's account. The trial went on for a very long time as the defendants flip-flopped back and forth on the decision to kill John. Amanda, who could not tolerate such a long trial, even made a deal with the investigators where she was promised to be charged with involuntary manslaughter at the next trial. Larry had given a very different speech when it all started, stating that the four of them had bought the ingredients to make illegal substances and went back to his trailer where he had started making them. Amanda had come up to him and said she wanted to get back at John. He explained that John, under the influence of drugs, had raped Anna Marie, who then got pregnant, and that he had to earn the trust of his daughters after all those years apart, so he couldn't refuse. Larry blamed himself for that and thought every day that he should hang himself, but questioned why it should be him if the crime was their fault. After Larry's speech, John's family got the floor. His mother sobbed non-stop, so much so that she couldn't say a word. She expressed that even if she could ever forgive the McClure family, she would never be able to forget what happened. She also conveyed that she wished she could live to see the day when one of them died before her. John's children were given a chance to speak, and they vehemently cursed the killers, declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge then delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without parole. When Amanda's punishment was announced, her adoptive parents were filled with regret, revealing to her that her biological father had been searching for her. They had raised her to have freedom of choice, but unaware that this freedom could have such severe consequences on her future. Amanda, however, shifted the blame to her biological father, claiming that his jealousy had driven her to commit the crime. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider the negative influence of her biological father, arguing that their adopted daughter would not have committed such a brutal crime without it. Nevertheless, the prosecutors viewed the murder as a premeditated conspiracy, orchestrated so that Amanda and Larry could be together as a couple. The first hearing focused on Amanda, who received a 40-year sentence. However, the judge predicted she would likely serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's hearing, she attempted to demonstrate her opposition to John's murder, but felt coerced by her father and sister to see it through. She only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of fear for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lin family. The Lin family's story is a heart-wrenching tale of love, ambition, and tragedy that began in the late 1980s. Min Lin and Yunli Lin, both Chinese nationals, met at an Australian university where they were pursuing higher education. Min had stayed on after completing his degree for a professional internship, while Yun had arrived through an exchange program. Their chance encounter in a university corridor sparked an instant attraction, which they later described as love at first sight. As foreigners in a new land, they shared a deep connection, united by their dreams of building a new life in Australia. After graduating, the couple married and settled down in the peaceful suburb of North Epping in Sydney. Their love flourished, and they built a close-knit family, deeply committed to each other. In August 1994, they welcomed their first child, June Brenda Lin, who went by her middle name Brenda. Two more children followed, Henry in 1997 and Terry in 2000. As the family entered the 2000s, Min and Yun decided to start a business venture, opening a small newsstand together. Through hard work and dedication, they turned their humble beginning into a successful news agency with a publishing branch on Rose Street. As their business thrived, they were able to afford a comfortable lifestyle, complete with a spacious home, a luxury car, and exclusive private schooling for their children. Min focused on managing the business, while Yun dedicated herself to taking care of their home and raising their kids. The community highly respected the Lins for their hard work, kindness, and charitable nature. They were known for being exemplary, caring parents who avoided conflicts. Their children were outstanding in their own ways. Brenda, the eldest, was a stunning beauty and an exceptional student with a passion for helping animals. Henry and Terry, the boys, were energetic and sports enthusiasts, sharing a love for soccer. The siblings were incredibly close, almost inseparable. As the Lin family's prosperity grew, they began to sponsor relatives from China to visit, live, or even settle in Australia permanently. Min's parents were the first to make the move, settling in North Epping and helping with the kids. Min's father also worked part-time at their newsstand on weekends. Later, Yun's parents also moved to the same Sydney suburb, and Min and Yun bought them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, joined the Lin household, helping with chores and childcare. By this time, the Lin family business had become very successful, earning almost $1 million per year. It had become a popular gathering place where people would come to read, discuss news, and socialize over coffee. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy Lin, and her husband, Lang Bin Robert, moved to Sydney seeking better opportunities. They had previously visited relatives in Australia and had briefly lived in Melbourne before returning to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert, a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. Kathy and Robert invested all their savings into opening their own restaurant in Sydney, but unfortunately it struggled and eventually closed. Their subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed. Robert, who lacked business experience and financial management skills, struggled to succeed in his new ventures. Robert and Kathy moved to North Epping to be closer to their family. Kathy found a job, but Robert was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. The Lin and Z families were close, not just because they were related, but also because they were good friends. They saw each other almost every day, kept in touch constantly, and often had meals together. The last time they all got together was on the evening of July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' house. Unfortunately, they didn't know it would be their last time together. The next morning, July 18th, the Lin family's shop didn't open, which was unusual because it was always open 7 days a week. The shop didn't have any signs or notices on the door saying it would be closed, which worried the regular customers and other shop owners in the area. One of them tried to call Min several times, but couldn't get through, so they called Kathy to ask her what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother Min never closed the shop without telling anyone first, and usually had their father or father-in-law cover for him. She tried calling Min and his wife Yun, but they didn't answer. She even tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert visited Min's house, worried about the family's safety. They arrived at 9 a.m. to find the family car in the driveway and the front door unlocked, but no one was responding to their calls. The house was quiet and seemed undisturbed, with no signs of forced entry. As Kathy called out for her brother again, she went upstairs to the second floor. When she opened the bedroom door of Min and Yunlin, she was shocked and horrified by what she saw. The room was covered in blood. On the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yunlin's lifeless body lay near the bed, so badly mutilated that it was hard to recognize. In the next room, Irene, Yun's sister, lay dead in her bed, her face brutally beaten. In the children's bedrooms, Kathy found the bodies of 12-year-old Henry and 9-year-old Terry, both brutally beaten to death and lying in different corners of the room. Brenda, the 15-year-old daughter, was fortunate to be away on a school trip the previous day and avoided being at home during the tragic events. When Kathy discovered the carnage, she immediately called emergency services, but her frantic state made it difficult for her to provide clear information. She begged for medical help to arrive quickly, hoping to save anyone who might still be alive. Unfortunately, the first responders who arrived at the scene confirmed the deaths of all the victims. The next morning, a disturbing discovery was made after Kathy's emergency call. Robert went to fetch Brenda's grandparents, who lived about 10 kilometers away, while the police and paramedics rushed to the scene. What they found was soon classified as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever encountered. The Lin family was tragically killed, each member suffering multiple blows to the head from a heavy blunt object, similar to a hammer. The murder weapon was not found at the scene. It appeared that the killer struck the father first, followed by the mother, her sister, and finally the two boys. Initially, investigators found no significant clues, and the fact that valuables and money were left untouched suggested that the primary motive was to eliminate the family rather than rob them. Initially, it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower the entire family, and multiple suspects were suspected. However, evidence revealed that the children were awake during the attack and had tried to escape, leaving behind bloodstains and splatters throughout the house. Further investigation showed that the adult victims, in addition to head injuries, also suffered signs of strangulation, possibly to minimize resistance during the assault. The killer left behind identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a unique tread pattern, but the shoe brand and owner could not be identified, only the shoe size. Notably, no foreign fingerprints were found, suggesting that the killer wore gloves. The Lin family massacre investigation initially yielded no leads or suspects, despite the family having no known enemies. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lin, the sole survivor and eldest child, was on a school trip to New Caledonia at the time. She was informed of the tragedy through social media, but initially disbelieved it, hoping it was a mistake. Her aunt Kathy called and confirmed the news, and Brenda was flown back to Sydney, where her new guardians, Kathy and Robert, met her. She moved in with them as the Lin family home was sealed as a crime scene. The next day, Brenda was questioned by the police, but could provide no new information, insisting her family had no enemies and had noticed nothing unusual before her trip. After her family's death, Brenda inherited the family business and properties. As she was still a minor, her Aunt Kathy and Uncle Robert became her legal guardians, responsible for managing the estate on her behalf. Although her grandparents offered to help, Kathy and Robert wanted to care for her, and the matter was resolved amicably. the family's shop and publishing business reopened under Robert's management. As Brenda was not yet ready to take over, Robert reviewed the family's financial assets, including bank accounts and properties. Experts examined the crime scene, but despite their efforts, found no concrete leads, suggesting the killer likely acted alone and entered the house quietly. The killer wore distinctive size 9.5 shoes with an ornate tread pattern, used a hammer as the weapon, and wore gloves, preventing fingerprint evidence. The lack of foreign DNA and bloodstains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the crimes occurred indicated the killer's bloody gloves touched them, except for Brenda's room, suggesting the killer was aware of her absence. The tragic incident received widespread media coverage, but despite this, no substantial evidence or suspects emerged. Rumors and theories circulated, including the Lin family's supposed wealth being the motive, a bungled robbery, or involvement by local Chinese mafia clans. While these theories were not entirely dismissed, they were later deemed unlikely due to a lack of evidence. As the investigation continued, none of the theories were proven, and no suspects came forward. The robbery theory was eventually ruled out when it became clear the killer's sole intention was to eliminate the household members, leaving behind untouched money and valuables. The power outage in the house suggests the killer was familiar with the location of the electrical panel and had likely been in the house before, possibly having obtained a key in advance. After thoroughly reviewing the case details, an investigator re-listened to Kathy's emergency call and finally discovered a significant hint in the recording. A 911 call recorded Kathy's desperate attempts to explain the situation, her words interspersed with cries and sobs. At the end of the call, Kathy surprisingly addressed her husband directly in Cantonese, saying she didn't want to be left alone in the house. This caught the investigators' attention, and they translated her words. This was significant because Robert had chosen to pick up his in-laws himself, leaving Kathy alone at the crime scene before the police arrived. His behavior seemed highly suspicious, as 5 people had just been brutally taken away from the house, and the killer could still have been hiding inside. The police discovered that Robert had a key to his brother-in-law's house, which he had been given just before the tragedy. He never mentioned this during questioning. Kathy was unaware of this fact, but Brenda unintentionally revealed it to the investigators. Further inquiry exposed Robert's false claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor. He had a medical degree, but never had a steady job in the field. There were rumors that he fled to Australia to escape punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. After settling in North America, Robert became financially dependent on his wife's income and occasional financial help from Kathy's relatives. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert behaved as if he had inherited the Lin family's entire estate. He forced Yun's parents out of the house that Min had bought for them, though it was legally under the deceased name. Considering these facts and circumstances, investigators believed Robert was motivated by jealousy of his wife's wealthy and successful relatives and had long planned to take their property, money, and business. The police couldn't arrest Robert yet because they lacked concrete evidence against him. They obtained permission to install hidden cameras in the Z household, hoping to gather evidence to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came when Kathy mentioned her husband's preference for a specific brand of shoes during an interrogation. Robert had bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers years earlier and still had a pair in its box at home. Significantly, Robert wore size 9.5 shoes, the same size as the killer's. Hidden cameras caught Robert destroying the box containing the shoes. This led to a search warrant for Robert's home, where a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers was found. The tread pattern on these shoes matched the prints found at the crime scene. Moreover, a small smear of blood was discovered in his garage. Forensic analysis confirmed that the smear was indeed a blood stain containing the DNA of all 5 Lin family victims, directly linking it to the crime scene. This evidence led to Robert's arrest, providing the concrete proof the police needed to take action. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, the evidence led to Robert's arrest. Despite his vehement denials of involvement, the police had finally gathered enough evidence to take action. Robert downplayed the importance of the sneakers found in his possession, claiming they were new and that he had gotten rid of the old pair. While awaiting trial in prison, he unknowingly shared cells with several informants and made some incriminating statements. During one conversation, Robert revealed that he had meticulously planned the crime and taken great care to cover his tracks. He admitted to buying the murder weapon at a remote store without surveillance cameras and drugging his wife with sedatives to prevent her from waking up and noticing his absence. Robert also confessed to disposing of the evidence, including the hammer, sneakers, gloves, and clothing, in a way that would ensure they would never be found. At the trial, however, Robert denied all of this, and the only evidence against him was the testimony from his cellmates and some indirect evidence. As a result, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and Robert was released on bail in December 2015. The trial resumed in June 2016 with new testimony from another informant who claimed that Robert had confessed to an obsession with Brenda since she was 13 years old. This new information led to a re-examination of Brenda, who tearfully revealed that Robert had coerced her into a sexual relationship when she was just 13. She had remained silent about the abuse for years, fearing retaliation. With this new evidence, Robert was found guilty on all charges. He received 5 life sentences, 1 for each murder, without the possibility of parole. All of his subsequent appeals were denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and her twin brother Rob shared a unique bond, fueled by their love of scary stories. As kids, they'd spend hours in a darkened room, taking turns telling each other spine-tingling tales. Rob fancied himself a master storyteller, but Cassandra would always scream at the end of each story, teasing him about not being scary enough. They'd also watch Scooby-Doo together, debating which characters might be ghosts or vampires in disguise. Cassandra's instincts often proved correct, leaving Rob on edge. Their mother, Mary Smith, encouraged their love of reading by buying them books by Robert Wall. What started as a childhood hobby evolved into a lifelong passion for horror. As adults, they even collected villain figurines and considered opening a horror-themed store. An interest in horror movies brought Cassandra to the set in 2004. She got a cameo in a scary movie that, although it didn't become popular, still caused a storm of envy and led Rob to start asking his sister to make a deal for him. He asked her if she had made some acquaintances there and said he was ready to play anyone. He urged her to talk, adding that he was pretty close with the head of the cast and maybe something would come out of it, but he made no promises. Cassandra replied that she had gotten the part by accident herself. Rob was very happy, but despite his enthusiasm, he was not able to play, even in an episodic role. The lead actor in the movie was Colin Dudley, and on set, he and the debutante actress felt an undeniable chemistry. However, neither of them dared to take the first step. That was until they attended a corporate Halloween party together. Cassandra dressed up as Velma from Scooby-Doo, while Colin went as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. The costume held a deeper significance for Colin than just a simple character. It seemed to resonate with him on a deeper level. He had been walking with a glass of milk all evening, looking at everyone with a glare, just as his character had done in the movie. He had also quoted a lot from the book. For example, he had looked at Cassandra with delight and had said that beauty invariably caused his only desire to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into their ugly world. Cassandra had thought it was a compliment, and they had soon started dating, but their relationship had not lasted long, only a couple of months. Colin had found another actress, Rebecca, and had started dating her, and later on, the couple had started living together. On August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cannell vanished without warning. She drove away from home in an unknown direction and failed to respond to phone calls. When her mother, Mary Smith, reported her disappearance to the police, they were initially reluctant to take action, suggesting that Cassandra might simply be out with friends and would turn up soon. But Mary was convinced that something was seriously wrong and pressed the police to investigate. It took 2 days for them to begin searching for Cassandra, and on the third day, they found her car parked under a bridge in a notorious neighborhood known for its high crime rate and homeless population. The car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was Cassandra in this dangerous area, known for its frequent violent crimes and drug-related deaths? The police had to canvass the neighborhood, questioning homeless individuals who, unsurprisingly, were hesitant to cooperate with the authorities. The residents living under the bridge, who spent their days drinking, had no information about Cassandra's whereabouts or when her car arrived. This lack of knowledge was hardly surprising. The detective in charge of searching for Cassandra had obtained her cell phone billing records, as per protocol, but based on his experience, he doubted it would lead to any useful leads, and indeed, it didn't. The signal from Cassandra's phone indicated it was in the nearby body of water under the bridge. Unfortunately, this meant the detectives would be unable to retrieve the phone and access the crucial information it held. Prior to conducting a thorough search of the coastal area, a team of divers stood on the shore and tested the distance they could throw rocks into the water. This test would help them gauge the likelihood of finding the phone. Cassandra's mother had mentioned that her daughter's phone case was adorned with distinctive rhinestones, making it easier to spot. As it turned out, the phone was soon found, but sadly, Cassandra's body was not in the water. While the detectives presented this as a positive development, Cassandra's mother remained distraught and unconsoled. She seemed to have gotten used to the idea that her daughter was dead, and the only thing she wanted was for her body to be found and for the nightmare of uncertainty to end. She sadly mentioned that she had been looking forward to her granddaughter, wanted to be a grandmother sooner, and didn't even have time to give her a crib, which was just sitting in the garage in a box. She wondered what she should do with it now, not realizing that this became important information for the investigation. According to statistics, a large number of crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith's daughter, Cassandra, was not married and did not have a partner. Despite her age, Cassandra was not in a relationship with anyone. Mary was puzzled because Cassandra had gotten pregnant, but she had no information about the baby's father. Cassandra had been in frequent contact with someone, often calling and messaging them. However, the phone number of this person was not recorded in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't remember the number. This lack of information left Mary in the dark about the identity of her future grandchild's father. Cassandra frequently communicated with a person without saving their number, which was unusual. Typically, girls couldn't keep their relationships completely secret and would confide in at least one friend, especially when it came to sensitive topics like pregnancy. In this case, the friend was acquainted with police officers. In conversation with the police, Cassandra revealed that she had reunited with her former boyfriend, Colin Dudley. Although their initial relationship in 2004 was brief, it was surprising that they reconnected after 15 years apart. What was even more unexpected was that Colin, with whom Cassandra worked on a movie set in 2014, was the one who reached out to her. Colin reached out to Cassandra on Facebook, expressing condolences and sharing the recent loss of his father, with whom his wife Rebecca had a troubled history. Cassandra, motivated by kindness, agreed to meet Colin to offer comfort, but their encounter blossomed into a romantic connection. From 2014 onwards, Colin led a double life, juggling two families, with Cassandra as his mistress. When Cassandra discovered she was pregnant, she chose not to inform Colin, recalling his earlier statement that he didn't want children and was happy with Rebecca's infertility. Fearful that revealing the pregnancy would disrupt his primary family, Cassandra kept the news secret. However, as her belly grew, it became increasingly difficult to conceal. To avoid arousing Colin's suspicion, Cassandra stopped seeing him. Cassandra knew she couldn't keep her secret hidden forever. Lying about having another boyfriend would hurt Colin and lead to their breakup. So she made the difficult decision to tell him the truth. She was pregnant with his child. Over the phone, Colin initially remained silent, but then surprisingly expressed his delight at the news. Cassandra believed he was genuinely happy about it. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Colin's house and knocked on the door. Colin's wife answered, and the detective, not wanting to discuss Colin's missing mistress in front of her, introduced himself as an old friend of Dudley's, avoiding any awkwardness. Colin quickly left the house with the detective, shutting the door behind him, and walked away from the house without even waiting for an introduction. He seemed to have been expecting their meeting. Colin thanked the detective for being discreet about his credentials in front of Rebecca. He spoke in short sentences, explaining that he had heard Cassandra was missing and found it extremely strange. He admitted he couldn't even guess where she might have gone. He told the detective that Cassandra had confided in him about her fight with her brother and was worried about it. He had advised her to make amends, but didn't know if she had taken his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and her brother, Rob, who had spoken to him about it. Rob had refused to meet with Cassandra on the day she disappeared, which he now regretted. Colin blamed himself for not being able to prevent her disappearance, thinking that if she had visited him that day, she might still be safe. Colin confessed to the detective that he wasn't a good person and acknowledged his past mistakes. He had secretly dated his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra, while still married to Rebecca, knowing it was wrong. He believed that his actions would have consequences in the afterlife, but insisted that he couldn't help who he fell in love with. After his father's death in 2014, Colin resumed his relationship with Cassandra, fulfilling one of his father's wishes. He had broken up with her soon after Christmas, which his father had criticized him for. His father had liked Cassandra, unlike Rebecca, whom he hated. Colin explained that living a double life for 5 years had been exhausting and guilt-ridden. He made excuses to hide his late-night returns, pretending to go on business trips or fishing, which he despised. He even bought fish to deceive Rebecca, who would cook them, despite the smell making him sick. Colin mentioned that Cassandra was pregnant, but didn't know who the father was. He heard from a close friend that Cassandra claimed the baby was his, which he found hard to believe. Lately, Cassandra had been avoiding him, and he understood why, as she wanted a family, something he couldn't provide. The detective asked Colin when he last saw Cassandra, and he replied that he couldn't remember, guessing it was around 3 to 4 months ago, except for a brief encounter at the mall when his wife was in the fitting room. Colin asked the detective if they thought they would find Cassandra alive, and the detective assured him they were doing everything possible. However, this wasn't Colin's last encounter with the detective. The police discovered that Colin was the owner of the unsigned phone number Cassandra's mother had mentioned. It turned out that Cassandra had frequently called Colin, including on the day she disappeared. Additionally, CCTV footage from the train station near the bridge where her car was found showed a suspicious man on the platform. The suspect wore a disguise, covering his face and head, making it impossible to identify him. However, the detective noticed that the man's gait and hat were eerily similar to those of Colin Dudley and Alex from A Clockwork Orange. The detectives followed the suspect through CCTV cameras, watching as he entered a cafe, left, and drove away in a car with a license plate registered to Colin Dudley. Armed with a search warrant, the police searched Colin's house, hoping to find Cassandra alive in the basement. Initially, they found no evidence of a crime, but they did discover the hat Colin had worn as a disguise. In the basement, a service dog trained to detect blood scents began barking, suggesting something was amiss. Colin claimed innocence, stating that the police were trying to frame him due to a lack of evidence and suspects. His wife was shocked and upset, but when asked if she thought her husband was capable of murder, she hesitated before saying no. Despite the circumstantial evidence, there wasn't enough to imprison Colin, frustrating Rob and Mary Smith and leaving the detective feeling helpless. Colin was questioned again, and he provided an alibi, stating that he had visited a hardware store on the morning of August 25th to buy cleaning supplies and trash bags. However, the large trash bags raised suspicions. The police also discovered a deleted text message from Cassandra, stating that she was approaching Colin's house. Additionally, phone records showed that the couple hadn't left the house for hours that morning. Colin had turned off his phone, but accidentally left Cassandra's phone on, allowing the police to track his movements, including his presence on CCTV cameras. After the murder, Colin went to a cafe to clean up, then drove to the pond where he had thrown away Cassandra's phone, which the police had tracked to its last signal. Now, the police needed to find Cassandra's body. To retrace Colin's route, the police took a GPS tracker from his car, which showed that it had followed the same path as Cassandra's phone. The next day, the police followed Colin's path through the woods and found a large trash can tied with ropes in a ravine. The area around it was covered in blood, and it was clear what was inside. After a month, identifying the body was difficult, but the police were able to do so thanks to a tattoo described in the missing persons report. Colin was arrested and charged with murder. A forensic examination revealed that Cassandra died from a fractured skull caused by blunt force trauma. The police also found traces of blood in the basement of the Dudley house that couldn't be fully cleaned. Rebecca, Colin's wife, had been in a different part of the house and hadn't heard anything. She also revealed that Colin had never wanted children and had lied about her infertility. The police considered this a motive for the crime. During the trial, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, the jury couldn't be convinced that Colin had committed the murder. So, the court offered Colin a deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would get a shorter sentence. Colin was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were devastated, feeling guilty that they hadn't met with Cassandra before her death, and that the killer would likely be released one day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where he received his education. At 20, he decided to serve his country and join the military. He was stationed at a base near Marquette, where he met Terry, a young teacher from Iron River. They became friends, bonding over their shared values and interests. Their friendship grew into a close relationship, but Christopher's military service didn't allow for a romantic relationship. When he left the military, he moved to Traverse City, but the distance didn't weaken their bond. In 2012, Christopher proposed a long-distance romantic relationship, and Terry agreed. They shared many common interests, including a love of nature and a desire for a peaceful lifestyle. They decided to live together in Iron River, where Christopher found a job at a factory. However, after 2 years, their passion faded and they parted ways amicably. Christopher moved out and began looking for a new place to live. He found a job in Asheville, North Carolina, and started a new chapter in his life. On October 14th, he told Terry he had taken the day off and suggested they meet up the next day for a walk. However, he failed to contact her the next day, and Terry became worried. After trying to reach him for several days, Terry filed a police report about Christopher's disappearance. The police reassured her that people sometimes disappear and then return, but Terry was concerned. At the police station, Terry told investigators that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina and might have started a new life, cutting ties with his past. However, to avoid speculation, a detailed investigation was launched. The police identified the company where Christopher had started working and contacted an employee, but surprisingly, no information about Christopher could be obtained, as he hadn't shown up to work in 10 days. Search efforts were then focused on the local woods, where Christopher often took solo trips with specially trained dogs deployed to aid in the search. Unfortunately, no trace of him was found. Terry suggested searching Christopher's former apartment to rule out any accidents or potential clues to his whereabouts. Upon entering the apartment, detectives found it in disarray, with items scattered across the floor and open closets. Although it initially seemed like Christopher was simply a messy person, Terry knew him to be more organized. The detectives began to suspect that the disarray might be related to a crime. After inspecting the apartment, they decided to expand the search area. They eventually found Christopher's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. Inside the car, they found ordinary clothes and a piece of yellow paper with a route written on it. The route had no specific address, but detailed notes described the path, including turning at a bus stop or driving past a gas station. Terry explained that Christopher, despite living in Iron River, wasn't familiar with the street names, so he wrote down directions in this way. The detectives followed the route, which led them to a house in a neighboring town. Upon knocking on the door, they met Jason Cochran, an overweight man, and his wife Kelly. The officers informed the couple that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and found a piece of paper with their address in his abandoned car. Kelly revealed that she worked with Christopher at the same plant, and they were friends. Although Kelly hadn't been in contact with Christopher recently, she had tried to reach him via text messages in mid-October. She assumed he had started his new job in North Carolina and didn't respond. Kelly also mentioned Christopher's health issues, which might have led him to start anew. The investigators were puzzled by the route leading to the Cochran home and why it was in Christopher's car. Despite the lack of answers, the couple cooperated with the investigation. After further questioning, the detectives left the Cochran home and proceeded to interview Christopher's co-workers at the factory. There, they discovered that Christopher was having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which had been rumored for months. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance sparked a new lead when Kelly Cochran made a surprising statement. Investigators decided to re-question Kelly and her husband Jason to get to the bottom of their relationship. Kelly eventually admitted to having an affair with Christopher, but initially withheld the information because of her husband's presence. Kelly claimed that she and Jason had an open relationship and Jason was okay with her infidelity. However, Christopher's co-workers disputed this, saying that Jason did not approve of the affair and that the Cochran family did not have an open relationship. When Jason was questioned, he revealed that he was strongly opposed to his wife's infidelity, making him a suspect. However, the lack of concrete evidence meant that the investigators couldn't conclude that he was involved in Christopher's disappearance. Kelly and Jason were released from the police station, and the investigation continued for 5 months without a breakthrough. A new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden, took over the case and began a thorough analysis of the Cochran family's history. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together after graduation. Despite their personality differences, they got married and started a swimming pool maintenance business. Jason handled most of the work, but the physical demands took a toll on his health, leaving him with back problems. When Jason's condition worsened, Kelly took over the business. During this time, Kelly sought ways to help her husband recover, including finding a medicinal plant that could help alleviate his back pain. However, the plant was banned in their state, so they moved to Michigan in 2014 to access it. In Michigan, Kelly and Jason got jobs at the same plant where Christopher worked. Kelly and Christopher became close friends, which was important to him given his relationship troubles with Terry. The prosecutors eventually obtained a search warrant for the Cochrans' home, but the search yielded no evidence linking them to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant find was a book written by Jason under a pseudonym inspired by video games. The title of the book caught their attention, but its content was disturbing. The book described violent murder scenes targeting everyone who had ever wronged Jason. The detectives read it thoroughly and found a character that matched Christopher's profile exactly. This strengthened their suspicions about Jason, making them wonder if he wasn't making up the crimes, but instead drawing inspiration from real events he had committed. 3 weeks later, the police decided to conduct another search of the Cochran house, hoping to find evidence they might have missed the first time. However, when they arrived, they found the house empty and the family had moved to Indiana. This made the investigators anxious, as they feared they might not find the crucial evidence they had been searching for months, particularly DNA samples from the suspects. Michigan police contacted their Indiana counterparts to help collect DNA samples from the Cochrans. The Indiana police officers went to the Cochrans' new home, and Jason and Kelly did not object to the procedure, as there was no concrete evidence linking them to the murder. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Kelly called the police, frantic, saying her husband Jason was unresponsive. When the rescue team arrived, they found Kelly in a panic, trying to obstruct the doctors. Jason was sitting in a chair, his face severely burned as if from extreme overheating. The doctors confirmed his death, and the body was sent for forensic examination. During the search of the Cochrans' new home, an officer discovered a syringe needle near the bed. The forensic report revealed that Jason's death was not due to drug abuse, as initially suspected, but rather strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. This discovery turned Jason, the prime suspect in Christopher's kidnapping, into a victim himself. The investigation became even more complex, and forensic experts shifted their focus to Kelly Cochran, who now became the prime suspect in both Christopher's disappearance and her husband's murder. Kelly was invited to the police station to testify in Jason's murder case. During the interrogation, the investigators asked her directly if she had administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to her husband or was involved in his death. However, despite the pressure, Kelly did not confess to either crime. Months later, the investigators still lacked concrete evidence to prove Kelly's guilt and justify an arrest. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's, who insisted that illegal drugs could not have caused Jason's death, as he knew his friend well and would have been informed about any changes in his life. Jason had been using medicinal herbs to alleviate his chronic back pain. However, his friend Walter noticed a significant change in his behavior around March last year. Jason confided in Walter about the mounting pressure from the Iron River police, who suspected him and his wife Kelly of involvement in a man's disappearance. The ordeal had taken a toll on Jason, leaving him depressed and even suicidal, which required intensive treatment. Walter observed that Kelly had begun to exert more control over Jason's life, making him increasingly anxious and withdrawn. Jason would avoid social gatherings when Kelly was around, and their video game sessions had become a thing of the past. These observations proved crucial in the investigation, helping detectives understand the dynamics within the Cochran family. After the medical examiner determined that Jason's death was by strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to lure Kelly into a trap. The plan involved using Walter as bait to prompt Kelly into making a mistake. Walter agreed to play along, and on March 12, 2016, he called Kelly under police surveillance. He pretended that Jason had given him a letter containing vital information, which Kelly was supposed to send to the police if anything happened to Jason. However, Kelly suddenly told Walter to drop the idea, catching both him and the police off guard. Despite this, detectives still lacked concrete evidence, and Kelly continued to deny her involvement during subsequent interrogations. On April 26, 2016, Kelly seemingly evaded the authorities, prompting a federal manhunt. Walter, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and fearful that Kelly might evade justice and potentially target him. The police eventually tracked Kelly's phone to the West Coast, and on April 28th, they arrested her at her cousin's home in Wingo, Kentucky. Once in custody, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher Rain, revealing that she had wanted to leave her husband and start a new life with him. However, when Jason discovered her infidelity, their situation escalated, and Kelly was bound by a pact they had made on their wedding night, obliging her to kill her lover if her cheating was exposed. Kelly Cochran claimed she never intended to follow through on an agreement she made with her husband, Jason, but he was determined to see it through. The agreement was a threat to kill Christopher Rain, Kelly's lover, if she didn't end the affair. Kelly didn't want to do it, but she ultimately helped Jason commit the crime. On October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house while her husband was away. Kelly offered him dinner and intimacy, and they went upstairs to the bedroom. However, Jason suddenly appeared, panicked and holding a rifle. Without hesitation, he shot Christopher in the head, killing him instantly. Under Jason's direction, Kelly helped dismember Christopher's body using a hacksaw, detaching his limbs and head from his torso. They placed the remains in trash bags and dumped them in the woods near Crystal Falls. They also drove Christopher's car away from the house to avoid suspicion and thoroughly cleaned the house to remove evidence of the crime. Kelly later confessed to her role in the crime, saying she wanted revenge against Jason for forcing her to end her affair with Christopher. She was deeply in love with Christopher and felt Jason had deprived her of happiness. Months later, on February 22, 2016, Kelly killed Jason by suffocating him after giving him a lethal dose of medication. She then helped the police find Christopher's remains, which were buried in the woods near Crystal Falls. A team of investigators and a canine unit searched the area and eventually found a human skull with a bullet hole, confirming it was Christopher's severed head. A .22 caliber bullet, a broken gun, and glasses likely belonging to Reagan were found at the scene. Dental records were used to identify the victim's remains, finally solving the 2-year-old missing person case. In April 2016, Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher Regan and Jason Cochran. On February 13, 2017, the 34-year-old was arraigned in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind both crimes and that her motive was rage and jealousy. Christopher viewed their relationship as casual, but Kelly genuinely loved him and wanted a future together. When Christopher refused to commit, Kelly decided to kill him, making up a story about a pact with her husband. The prosecution had strong evidence, including Kelly's confession in court. However, Kelly claimed she was being abused by her jealous husband, who had planned and committed the crime. She said he hid in the basement, caught the lovers off guard, and then shot Christopher in a rage. Kelly claimed Jason suggested dismembering the body and coerced her into helping by threatening to kill her. This version raised doubts about Kelly's guilt, but the jury still found her guilty of premeditated murder. Kelly was sentenced to life without parole. Jason Cochran's case was settled with a plea agreement, and Kelly received an additional 65 years in prison. Kelly was sent to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Michigan, where she is serving her sentence and regrets that her personal life didn't work out. In a phone interview, Kelly said, "I tried to do what I thought was right. I got married." She also shared, "It was good in the beginning, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. All I did was work while my husband played computer games." In prison, Kelly continues to reveal details of her crimes, claiming she and Jason committed more crimes and that Christopher was just one of their many victims. However, Kelly's claims are difficult to verify, and there is no concrete evidence to support them. Her brother has also heard similar claims, but there is no evidence to back them up. Detective Jeremy Ogden is investigating the details, hoping to find evidence of other possible crimes committed by Kelly and Jason Cochran. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Austin Harf. Austin Harf was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida, to a wealthy and respected family of doctors. His father was a successful dentist with multiple private clinics, and his mother was a leading pharmaceutical specialist. The family lived in a large, luxurious oceanfront home. When Austin was 13, his parents divorced, and his father moved out of the family home into a new residence with his new partner, who soon became his wife. Austin and his siblings stayed with their mother, but their father remained involved in their lives and provided financial support. Within a year, Austin's mother also remarried, and her new husband moved in with them. Although Austin struggled with his parents' divorce, he continued to excel academically and athletically. Austin dreamed of becoming a doctor like his parents and hoped to attend a prestigious medical school. In high school, he was both an honor student and an outcast. Despite his transformation into a tall, muscular, and charming young man, he remained shy and struggled to make friends and form romantic relationships. In his teenage diary, Austin wrote about feeling isolated at school, where his classmates labeled him a nerd and bullied him. He hoped that things would improve when he went to college, changed his social circle, and moved away from home. A few months before graduating from high school, Austin discovered that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's 4-year medical program. During his teenage years, Austin kept a personal diary where he confided about being ostracized by his classmates, who called him a nerd and teased him relentlessly. He harbored hope that his life would improve once he entered college, formed new friendships, and gained independence from his parents. As he approached the end of high school, Austin received the exciting news that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's esteemed 4-year medical program. Austin's successful program completion paved the way for promising career opportunities and the chance to attend any U.S. medical school. Overjoyed that his dream had come true, he began his college journey with his parents' support. In a vlog, he shared his transition to independent adult life, but despite this new chapter, his shyness persisted, making it difficult for him to connect with peers. Austin briefly dated a girl, but she ended the relationship due to concerns about his behavior. Instead, he focused on bodybuilding during his freshman year, dedicating significant time to the gym and achieving impressive results, including developing strong muscles. However, his success was not solely due to his hard work and perseverance. He had also started using steroids regularly. Austin started a YouTube channel in the spring of 2016, where he posted various videos. Some were about sports and bodybuilding, while others featured him singing and playing the guitar, doing cover versions of popular songs, and mimicking famous artists. He also shared his thoughts on life and philosophy. However, over time, Austin's videos became increasingly concerning. He began to advise his followers against using steroids, claiming they could drive people insane. He also talked about having a crazy and normal side and seemed confused by these different personalities. In some videos, he would speak in different accents, change his tone of voice, or burst into tears for no reason. His mood and facial expressions would also change suddenly, making it seem like he was just making faces at the camera. Looking back, experts believe that Austin was desperately trying to ask for help in his videos. The channel became his only outlet for expressing his feelings, as he struggled to make friends during his studies. Unfortunately, the videos also document his gradual descent into madness, with his behavior becoming more provocative, aggressive, and sensational. Many of his subscribers suspected that he was using controlled substances and recording his videos while under their influence. Austin's subscribers questioned him about his suspicious behavior, but he denied using drugs, citing his athletic background. However, his actions told a different story, with some even speculating that he might have a dissociative identity disorder. Meanwhile, when Austin returned home for summer break, his mother and sister were shocked by the drastic changes in him. Over the past year, Austin had undergone a dramatic physical transformation, building significant muscle mass. But the changes went beyond his physique. He had become increasingly odd, speaking nonsensically, and claiming he no longer needed sleep. At first, his family dismissed his claims, but they were forced to take him seriously when he insisted on patrolling the house at night, supposedly to protect them from dark forces. Austin followed through on his promise, wandering the house until morning, leaving his family concerned and confused. Every hour, Austin would check on his mother and sister, loudly reassuring them that they could sleep safely because he was watching over them. The next morning, his mother had a straightforward conversation with him, directly asking if he was using drugs. Austin honestly admitted that he had tried nearly every drug over the past year, explaining how each one affected him. He mentioned a powerful synthetic drug that caused intense hallucinations, violent outbursts, and could even be fatal. Despite this, Austin promised his mother that it was behind him and he no longer used the drug that had driven him to madness. After listening to her son, Mrs. Harif made a critical mistake. She didn't seek help from medical professionals, deciding instead to handle the situation on her own. As a pharmacist, she took matters into her own hands, giving Austin a sedative and a sleeping pill, thinking it would calm him down and help him sleep after a restless night. Austin continued to patrol the house every night, assuring its occupants that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. This went on for weeks, but the mother refused to seek professional help or tell her ex-husband about the situation. On the morning of August 13th, Austin unexpectedly visited a former classmate who lived nearby. The classmate was surprised by the unannounced visit, especially since they hadn't seen each other in over a year. When asked why he came, Austin claimed he had forgotten his birth year and urgently needed to know the answer. The classmate told him he was born in 1996. Austin then suddenly turned around and left without saying a word. His strange behavior frightened and confused the classmate, who immediately called Mrs. Harif to share what had happened and ask if Austin might be using drugs. She grew concerned about her son's behavior and decided to call her ex-husband, who was working in another state. She shared her worries with him, and he immediately flew to Florida to discuss the situation with their son. After talking to him, the father suggested that their son voluntarily check into a clinic for an evaluation, but the son refused. The father then had a heartfelt conversation with the mother, and together they decided to seek compulsory examination and treatment for their son at a drug rehabilitation or psychiatric facility. Unfortunately, they couldn't act fast enough. The next day, Austin's friends invited him to join them at the beach, taking advantage of the hot weather. His mother asked Haley to accompany her brother to keep an eye on him. Austin was thrilled about the outing, but he dressed unusually warmly, as if preparing for a trip to the mountains. He wore a thick athletic hoodie, long-sleeved pants, boots, and ski goggles. His friends were initially silent when they saw him, then burst out laughing. A few seconds later, the group started teasing Austin about his outfit, asking if he was okay. Austin's anger surged, and he threatened to harm one of them if they thought he was crazy. Although they didn't take him seriously, they backed off to be safe. Haley noticed her brother was on the edge and decided to intervene. She took him aside for a private conversation, where Austin revealed a shocking secret. He was half human, half wild animal, immortal, and possessed superhuman strength. Haley was frightened, but tried to stay calm to avoid provoking Austin further. Despite the intense conversation, Austin acted normally at the beach, joking and playing volleyball with friends. As the evening drew to a close, the group said their goodbyes and headed their separate ways. Austin and Haley went to a nearby restaurant to meet their father and his wife. On the way, Austin told Haley he wanted to test his immortality and then headed towards a busy highway, planning to cross it recklessly through the fast-moving traffic. Haley intervened when she realized what was happening and pulled her brother away, urging him to hurry because they had a prior commitment. Austin agreed not to keep anyone waiting and quietly followed his sister. During dinner, Austin's behavior was peculiar. He got up from the table several times, went outside, and looked around nervously, as if he feared someone was watching him. Upon returning, he revealed his immortality to his father and stepmother. When his father suggested seeking professional help, Austin became defensive, insisting he wasn't crazy, and in a fit of anger, pushed his father and stormed out of the restaurant. A young man's brutal attack on an elderly couple and their neighbor is a terrifying incident that unfolded like a horror movie. After leaving a restaurant, the young man, Austin, walked several miles until he stumbled upon an open garage in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Inside the garage was an elderly couple, John Stevens, 59, and Michelle Mishcon Stevens, 56, who were preparing for a quiet movie night. They married for over 25 years, had 3 adult children, and were enjoying their retirement. On this particular evening, John had gone for a walk with their dog while Michelle set up for their usual movie night. When Michelle saw Austin on their lawn, she didn't feel threatened and even offered to help him. However, the situation took a dark turn. Their neighbor, Jeffrey Pfizer, who lived across the street and was friendly with the Stevens, heard strange noises outside around 9 p.m. He looked into the yard and was met with Michelle's blood-curdling scream. Without hesitation, Jeffrey rushed to help his neighbors, where he saw a tall, large young man attacking an elderly woman by her open garage. Jeffrey tried to intervene, but the young man was incredibly strong and knocked him to the ground. As Jeffrey struggled to get up, the assailant stabbed him multiple times in the back and shoulder. Realizing he was outmatched and needed assistance, Jeffrey quickly ran into his friend's house to distract the attacker and lead him away from himself. He escaped through the back door and made his way to his own home. Once inside, he realized the assailant had not followed him and had returned to the neighbor's house, where Michelle was being attacked. Jeffrey immediately called the police and emergency services, reporting that he and his elderly neighbor had been victims of an armed attack by a stranger with a knife. After speaking with the emergency operator, Jeffrey fell silent, listening carefully. He soon became convinced that the attacker was no longer outside his door, but had remained at the neighbor's house. The assailant began making loud animal-like noises, similar to a wild beast growling, accompanied by screams of terror and moans. Tragically, the police took about 10 minutes to arrive, but by then it was too late. The assault had turned fatal, and the outcome was devastating. The officers were met with a horrific and inexplicable scene upon approaching the garage. 2 officers drew their weapons as they entered, but froze in shock at the doorway. Before them lay the lifeless body of Michelle Mishcon Stevens, the homeowner, in a pool of blood. The autopsy would later reveal that she had suffered multiple blunt force traumas to the head and a stab wound to the chest. As they ventured further into the dimly lit garage, they spotted 2 more individuals on the ground. It took a moment for the officers to comprehend the disturbing scene. One man was lying on the ground, desperately crying out for help in a strained voice. Above him, another man was pinning him down, grasping his neck with one hand and tilting his head back with the other. The officers ordered the attacker to release the victim, threatening to shoot if necessary, but the assailant didn't respond. Due to the risk of hitting the victim, firing was not an option. Instead, one officer pulled out a taser, warning the attacker that he was about to be stunned. As the officer moved closer, he was met with a gruesome sight. The attacker was not only holding the victim down, but was also biting his face, clutching his head and neck tightly. The victim was John Stevens, Michelle's husband, and he was lying in a vast pool of blood. Part of his left cheek was missing, and his lip, nose, and ear were severely mutilated, seemingly chewed off. An elderly man was severely attacked and unable to move, silently pleading for help. The officer tried to stop the attacker by using a taser, but it had no effect. The attacker continued to viciously bite the victim's face, even after receiving a kick to the face. Multiple kicks did not deter him. Additional police officers arrived, including one with a police dog, which was released to subdue the attacker. The dog bit the attacker's arm, but he showed no signs of feeling pain and managed to break free, causing himself further injury. Finally, a powerful kick from an officer disoriented the attacker long enough to allow him to be handcuffed. Immediately after being restrained, the attacker claimed he felt unwell, possibly due to something he had eaten, before losing consciousness and convulsing. 4 people were taken to the hospital after a violent incident. Mrs. Stevens died at the scene, and her husband died on the way to the hospital due to severe injuries from stab wounds. The injured neighbor, who reported the incident, survived but suffered permanent nerve and tendon damage to his right hand. The attacker, Austin Harif, fell into a coma after drinking weed killer from a bottle in the garage, which severely burned his esophagus and stomach. He spent several days close to death, but was eventually saved. When he woke up 2 weeks later, he claimed to have no memory of the events. Gradually, Austin started to remember the argument with his father and walking away. He then recalled seeing a ghost-like figure leading him through dark alleys until he saw a lantern near the Stevens garage, where he attacked Mrs. Stevens. He claimed to have seen her as evil and tried to rid her of it. When the neighbor, Jeffrey Fisher, intervened, Austin perceived him as a demon and attacked him with a knife. After Fisher escaped, Austin continued to assault Mrs. Stevens until she showed no signs of life. He then drank from the bottle thinking it was alcohol, and soon heard a dog barking and a man's voice. Austin claimed no memory of what happened next. At the hospital, tests revealed no drugs, medication, or alcohol in Austin's blood, leading to suspicions of a psychotic break. The case attracted widespread media attention due to its brutality and uncertainty. While some believed Austin was faking insanity to avoid punishment, a psychological expert concluded that he had a mental illness that led to an acute psychotic episode. However, the prosecutor did not believe Austin met the legal definition of insanity at the time of the crime. Suggestions arose that Austin's mental health had deteriorated due to drug use and social difficulties, but he was clean at the time of the crime. Austin's father revealed a family history of schizophrenia, and a rare disorder called clinical lycanthropy delusion was suspected, which might explain Austin's wild behavior. However, no psychiatrists confirmed the diagnosis. After treatment, Austin was transferred to jail, where he awaits trial. His lawyers claim he is mentally ill, while the relatives of the victims hope he will be found competent and sentenced to death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Elizabeth Arellano. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born on August 16, 1987, in Fort Worth, Texas, where she spent her entire life. She grew up with her 2 sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, and the 3 were incredibly close. After her biological father left the family when she was very young, her mother, Juanita, remarried a man named Fidel, who adopted Elizabeth and her sisters, treating them as his own. Elizabeth had a warm and loving relationship with her stepfather, who supported her in all her endeavors. She was a diligent student and dreamed of becoming a doctor one day. In high school, she met Rudolph Arellano, who was almost 8 years older than her, and the 2 began a romantic relationship. Although her parents were initially hesitant about their age difference, they trusted Rudolph and allowed the relationship to continue. At 16, Elizabeth married Rudolph and soon had 4 children, 3 sons, and a daughter. However, she didn't plan to give up her career aspirations to become a full-time mother. She pursued her childhood dream, graduating from medical school and working as a paramedic, with hopes of furthering her education to become a doctor. Elizabeth was a kind and pious woman, raised in a Christian tradition. She was devoted to her children and instilled in them the importance of loving and helping others. Those close to her described her as a caring and responsive person, always willing to lend a helping hand. From the outside, her marriage to Rudolph appeared to be strong and happy, but beneath the surface, it was struggling. Rudolph's jealousy and controlling behavior had been a problem for years, and over time, it became increasingly unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth finally reached her breaking point after another jealous outburst from her husband. Taking her children with her, she moved back to her parents' house. Rudolph attempted to reconcile, but Elizabeth was exhausted from tolerating his anger and didn't want her children to witness the constant fighting. So, she found the courage to file for divorce. Shortly after, Elizabeth mysteriously disappeared. According to her friends and family, she had been in good spirits and had decided to go out with colleagues to a local club after work to take her mind off her marital problems. On Friday evening, April 15, 2016, 28-year-old Elizabeth went out with her friends to a fun spot. She had a great time dancing, but didn't drink alcohol because she had driven her car to the club and planned to drive home. After a successful night out, Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th, parking her car outside her house. She then phoned a friend she had been with at the club to let them know she had arrived home safely. However, despite saying she was home, Elizabeth never actually entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was frantic with worry when she discovered Elizabeth was not at home. She knew her daughter had planned to spend the evening with friends, but she should have been back long before. It wasn't like Elizabeth to disappear without a word, and the fact that her car was parked outside only added to the mystery. Clearly, Elizabeth had returned from the club, but where was she now? When Juanita approached the car, she was shocked to find it unlocked with the key still in the ignition. Her daughter's purse and phone were on the seat, indicating that something was seriously wrong. Juanita immediately called the police to report her daughter, Elizabeth, missing. The police were hopeful they could quickly solve the case, given the leads they had. There was no sign of struggle or blood in the car, suggesting Elizabeth might still be alive. However, to move forward, they needed to piece together a detailed timeline of Elizabeth's movements that evening. To start, the police interviewed Elizabeth's friends and colleagues, who confirmed the time she left their gathering and later spoke with her when she arrived home safely. The police also found several calls and messages from Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph Arellano, on her phone, which showed he had tried contacting her multiple times that night. The police went to Rudolph's house to investigate his whereabouts on the previous evening and night. Rudolph claimed he had spoken to his ex-wife, Elizabeth, the night before, and she had promised to bring their children to him for the weekend. However, she stopped answering his calls, leading him to believe she had changed her mind. The police found Rudolph's alibi suspicious. He said he had been at a local bar with a friend that evening and returned home around midnight. While his friend and other patrons confirmed he was at the bar, no one could verify where he went after leaving. Since Rudolph lived alone, there was no one to confirm he went home, making it difficult for the police to rule him out as a suspect. The police were intrigued by Rudolph's calm demeanor, given that his ex-wife was missing and they were in the process of divorce. Despite being married for many years and Elizabeth being the mother of his children, Rudolph seemed unaffected by her disappearance, which only added to the suspicions surrounding him. On the night a young mother vanished, a fisherman phoned emergency services to report a bizarre event. He was sitting alone on a bridge that spans an interstate highway, fishing, when at around 4:30 a.m., he witnessed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver throw a large object, resembling a person, into the water. From his distance, he couldn't see details, but it seemed like something heavy and bulky was tied to the person. The darkness and strong wind on the bridge prevented him from seeing the car's make and number or hearing any sounds. Shortly after, a second witness came forward, who was walking his dog near the bridge. Although he didn't see what happened on the bridge, a distressing scream caught his attention, followed by something large falling from the bridge and a subsequent splash, then silence. Based on the witnesses' accounts, the police decided to investigate the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers discovered a body with a large concrete block tied to its neck with a rope. The body of Elizabeth Arellano, a missing woman, was found drowned. A passerby and a fisherman's testimonies helped locate her body, which would have likely gone undiscovered due to the strong tidal currents that prevented it from floating. An initial theory suggested that Elizabeth might have voluntarily ended her life due to family problems. However, this was quickly dismissed as it contradicted the witness account of someone throwing her into the water. Her relatives also confirmed that Elizabeth had big plans for her life and would never abandon her children and parents. The forensic medical results and a man's testimony, who heard Elizabeth's desperate screams as she was thrown off the bridge, revealed that she was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck. She subsequently suffocated to death. The brutal murder of Elizabeth, a mother of many, has left investigators baffled as to who could have committed such a heinous crime. Robbery has been ruled out as a motive, as none of her belongings were taken. Instead, it's possible that the killer may have stalked her from a club she visited or lay in wait for her at her home. Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph, has denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home sleeping on the night of the murder. However, investigators are not convinced, as he has no alibi and his behavior has raised suspicions. At his ex-wife's funeral, Rudolph appeared grief-stricken, saying he wished he could have died in her place. He even helped set up a charity to raise funds for her farewell ceremony, which seemed to convince his sister of his sincerity. However, when questioned again after the funeral, Rudolph's demeanor had drastically changed, as if nothing had happened. A review of CCTV footage has revealed a new lead. A car similar to Rudolph's was seen leaving Elizabeth's parents' house around 3 a.m. on the night of her murder. The neighbor remembered seeing the car parked near the deceased's house on the road. Similarly, another neighbor saw the car parked nearby. Significantly, it was discovered that the car later drove towards the bridge where the victim was thrown. This detail sparked many questions. When the investigation examined Rudolph's cell phone data for the night of the crime, the questions multiplied. The records showed that he made multiple calls, first near Elizabeth's workplace and then near his in-laws' home. Additionally, he sent several messages to his ex-wife, trying to find out when she would return, but received no response. It appears that he had been tracking her movements and eventually decided to wait for her return at her parents' house. The police gathered sufficient evidence to arrest Rudolph as the main suspect and take him in for further investigation. A crucial witness in the case was Rudolph's eldest son, who shared vital information with the authorities. When shown the rope found around his mother's neck, the boy recalled seeing it in his father's backyard, where he had played with it earlier. Additionally, the boy identified a piece of concrete from their garden, which had appeared after the fence was replaced. Significantly, small fragments of this concrete were discovered in the trunk of Rudolph's car. The investigation revealed that Rudolph had waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home, abducted her, and prevented her from entering the house. Rudolph Arellano kidnapped his ex-wife by forcing her into his car, where he had already prepared rope and concrete in the trunk. He then drove to a bridge, intending to kill her without being noticed. However, his plan was foiled when her body was later recovered from a lake. Arellano was arrested 10 days later, but initially denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home on the night of the murder. Despite the overwhelming evidence and eyewitness testimony against him, Arellano maintained his innocence. However, faced with the possibility of the death penalty, he took his lawyer's advice and confessed to the crime. He cooperated with the investigation in hopes of reducing his sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Arellano pleaded guilty in court and provided a detailed account of how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife, the mother of their 4 children. The courtroom drama was intense, with Juanita, one of his daughters, fainting upon hearing his confession. His other daughters, Alessandra and Giovanna, were devastated, calling their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph showed no remorse or guilt for his actions, speaking about the murder in a cold and detached manner. He did not apologize or provide a motive for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite considering the sentence too lenient, Elizabeth's family chose to forgive Rudolph, as they did not want to be consumed by hatred. Her parents and sisters took on the responsibility of raising Elizabeth's children. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30th, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1st, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close to those he cared about. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Aysel Nogoybayeva. Aysel Nogoybayeva was born in 1986 in Tokmak, Kyrgyzstan. After finishing school, she took hairdressing courses and moved to Bishkek to work in a salon. There, she met Azamat Estebesov, who came to her salon for a haircut. They hit it off, and he invited her out for coffee. Aysel's family approved of Azamat, who was religious and respectful of Muslim traditions. At 19, she married him, and soon they had a son. However, Azamat's behavior changed, and he became abusive. One evening, while bathing their son, Azamat accidentally poured too much water on him, causing the child to cry. Aysel reacted angrily, and Azamat responded by hitting her in the face. Aysel left with her son and went to her mother's house. Azamat apologized and begged for forgiveness, promising it would never happen again. However, Aysel, who had grown up without a father, was determined to make her marriage work for the sake of her son. She believed Azamat's apology and thought they could move forward. The family returned to Tokmak, and Aysel became pregnant with their second child. However, Azamat's abuse continued. One day, while Aysel was walking with her son, she ran into some classmates, and after the walk, Azamat struck her again. Aysel suffered a devastating blow from her husband Azamat, which caused her to fall and miscarry. This incident triggered a pattern of abuse, with Azamat constantly looking for excuses to beat her. Despite his once kind and attentive nature, Azamat's gaze was now filled with anger and hatred. Aysel felt trapped, living under Azamat's total control, and her only solace was her children. Her mother, aware of the situation, eventually took Aysel in, but Azamat continued to harass her, begging for forgiveness and promising to change. However, he would return to his abusive ways, and Aysel would be forced to endure it. Aysel went to the police multiple times, but domestic violence is not punishable by law in Kyrgyzstan, and Azamat would only receive short sentences. The abuse continued for 6 years, with Azamat threatening to kill Aysel and her family if she ever filed for divorce. Aysel's family finally helped her escape to Italy, where she worked multiple jobs to save money and become financially independent. After 3.5 years, she had enough to buy an apartment and start a business. Although she was relieved to be free from Azamat's abuse, she missed her children and worried about their well-being. When Aysel returned to Kyrgyzstan, she was shocked to find her children living in squalid conditions, neglected and uneducated. Azamat had raised them according to traditional Turkic values, forcing them to attend a madrasa instead of school. Aysel took her children back, but Azamat continued to harass her, eventually cornering her and raping her in a dark alley. Aysel reported the incident to the police, and Azamat was detained. However, his family intervened, pressuring Aysel to withdraw her complaint. According to Kyrgyz tradition, it is shameful for she to report her husband's abuse, and Azamat's relatives convinced Aysel to retract her statement in exchange for Azamat's relinquishment of parental rights. Aysel's ex-husband, Azamat, remained her official father despite his abuse. In fact, the Sakalu District Court dismissed a case against him due to a counter-application and reconciliation. However, after his release, Azamat began harassing and threatening Aysel, sending her daily messages saying he would kill her if he caught her. He waited for her at her driveway, work, and followed her everywhere for 3 months. Aysel's relatives took turns living with her and her children to protect her, but this didn't save her from Azamat's second violent attack. On January 31, 2023, Aysel reported to the police again that Azamat had used force against her, and a criminal case was opened. The suspect was detained, but instead of a 5-year imprisonment, he was given 3 years of probation due to his elderly mother's disability and his 2 children. Aysel was devastated and felt driven into a corner with no escape. She didn't believe anyone and didn't listen to Azamat's relatives. Instead, she hired a lawyer and filed an appeal with the CH Regional Court, providing all the threatening messages and voice recordings. However, a series of events constantly postponed the hearing, bringing closer the worst day of Aysel's life. Azamat continued to walk freely and make attempts on her life, even sending her a photo of a black backpack with a knife and rope, saying he was ready to meet her. On September 20, 2023, Aysel woke up her children, had breakfast with them, and accompanied her eldest son to school. As she was about to leave the house, Azamat suddenly appeared and hit her on the head twice. He then grabbed her throat and started strangling her, causing her to lose consciousness. When Aysel regained consciousness, she realized that her son was crying and begging Azamat not to harm him. Azamat threw Aysel to the floor, picked her up, and continued to abuse her. He stabbed her face and neck with a clerical knife in cold blood. The next time Aysel regained consciousness, she was surrounded by blood and didn't realize what was happening. She had lost a lot of blood and her throat was dry, and all she could do was ask for a drink. Aysel's ex-husband, Azamat Estebesov, brought her a bucket containing water mixed with blood, revealing his sinister intentions. He started selecting a knife from the kitchen, preparing to inflict harm. His goal was to reach a seal's heart, implying a deep and fatal wound. Just as he was about to attack, the police burst into the house, responding to a call from a concerned neighbor who had heard Aysel's screams and knew about her troubled past with Azamat. This timely intervention saved Aysel's life. Azamat resisted the officers, attacking them with a knife. Amidst the chaos, the brutal extent of the attack was unclear, but the apartment was covered in blood. It was later revealed that Azamat had started cutting Aysel in the bathroom, then dragged her to the kitchen, severing her nose and ears, inflicting multiple wounds on her face and neck, cutting her throat, and beating her severely. When the district police officers arrived, they quickly called an ambulance, assessing the severity of Aysel's injuries. In their search for the removed organs, they were unable to find them. Her ears and nose were shockingly found in the monster's pocket. After finding her, the police took Aysel to the 4th City Hospital in Bishkek, but surprisingly, the doctors refused to provide her with first aid, claiming she didn't belong to their hospital based on her regional identity card. Not only did the doctors neglect to treat Aysel, but they also failed to stop her bleeding. It wasn't until she was taken to a second hospital that she finally received first aid and the bleeding was stopped. Aysel was then transferred to the National Hospital, where she underwent a 9-hour operation. A team of 6 doctors worked meticulously to restore her face, carefully reattaching her severed organs, including her earlobes and nerve nodes, which had been precisely cut off with a special knife. The nose was also completely severed. Aysel remained unconscious for a long time after the operation, but miraculously survived. Psychologists warned that her recovery would be a long and perilous journey. She was brutally attacked and left disfigured. The authorities launched a criminal investigation into the incident, resulting in the detention of the suspect, who was sent to a pretrial detention center on September 27, 2023. The suspect, Azamat Estebesov, was initially sentenced to a lesser punishment, but thanks to a presidential decree, his sentence was increased to 8 years of imprisonment. The presidential decree also led to the dismissal of 9 judges, including Kelbek Toto Mamatov from the Soik District Court of the CH region, who had previously released Estebesov under probation supervision. The judges were dismissed due to violations of the Code of Conduct for Judges. The authorities then reopened all previous cases involving Estebesov, with 6 investigators re-examining the evidence. As a result, they found new evidence and brought new charges against him, with a total of 11 articles in the updated indictment. Azamat Estebesov's trial concluded on January 26, 2024. After investigative activities ended in December 2023, Estebesov denied all 11 charges against him and refused to answer the judge's questions, sometimes claiming demonic possession. He also behaved aggressively towards witnesses, leading to a trial postponement. Judge Tulkadir Kulova ultimately sentenced Estebesov to 20 years in prison without parole, plus a fine of 880,000 sums to the state and 2 million sums to his ex-wife. 1 day in pretrial detention counted as 2 in the sentencing. Estebesov appealed, but the sentence remained unchanged. Asel Nuibayeva, Estebesov's ex-wife, expressed her intention to continue seeking justice, demanding life imprisonment for her former spouse and punishment for those who enabled his actions. She hopes to set an example to prevent other women in Kyrgyzstan from suffering as she and her family have. Asel Nogobayeva's family and activists are demanding a life sentence for her ex-husband, Azamat, who continued to send threatening texts to Asel even after being imprisoned, warning her that he would find her when he got out. This case has highlighted the powerlessness of women in the face of the law in Kyrgyzstan, and how a loving partner can suddenly turn into a ruthless aggressor. The case has sparked widespread outrage across Kyrgyzstan, prompting Asel's sister, Diana Yellen, to appeal to members of parliament to pass a law on domestic violence. She warned that if they failed to do so, she would hold them accountable for their inaction, emphasizing that one wrong decision could have devastating consequences. Asel's sister also launched a petition calling for Azamat to be sentenced to life in prison without parole. Asel's sister stated that her sister's experiences with domestic abuse were a stark reminder of the dangers of violent partners. She recounted that even after divorcing her husband 5 years ago due to his physical and emotional abuse, he had continued to stalk, beat, and torment her. She asserted that people like Azamat Estebesov posed a significant threat to society and should not be allowed to roam free, describing them as obsessive and dangerous individuals who belonged behind bars. She demanded a life sentence without parole for the person who had already inflicted severe emotional trauma on his victim. She urged everyone to sign the petition, regardless of where the heinous crime had taken place. She emphasized that domestic violence could take many monstrous forms and that it was essential for women worldwide to unite against this issue. She reminded everyone that a person's religious beliefs did not guarantee their moral character. She mentioned that Asel had started a new life, but her new identity had brought her immense pain. Although her physical wounds were slowly healing, recovering her hearing and breathing functions would be a long and arduous process. In a recent interview, Asel had shared the heartbreaking experience of seeing her face for the first time after the tragedy. Asel had said that she wasn't allowed to look at herself in mirrors, so there weren't any in her room. One day, when her doctors were away, she had taken advantage of the situation to go to the first floor to get dressed. As she was removing her bandages, she had caught a glimpse of herself in a metal operating lamp that the on-duty doctor had left behind. Seeing her reflection had shocked her so much that she had lost consciousness. 2 weeks later, Asel's brother decided to let her see her face while dressing her at home. To prepare, he removed all the mirrors in the house except for one in the bathroom that couldn't be taken down. When he briefly left the room, Asel quickly got up and took a look at herself in the mirror. The shock was too much, and she fainted. She was overcome with hysteria, saying that no one should ever have to see such ugliness. However, Asel still had a long way to go before her face could be fully restored. Before undergoing plastic surgery, she would need multiple operations to rebuild her face, including reconstructing her ears and nose. These surgeries would require extensive preparation, skin grafting, and a recovery period of at least a year. Additionally, Asel had lost 20% of her hearing, which would also need to be corrected. Asel Nogoybaeva, she who was brutally mutilated by her ex-husband, requires a series of complex operations to restore her ears and nose. Unfortunately, these operations cannot be performed in Kyrgyzstan and must be done in a country like Turkey, which requires a significant amount of money. A Turkish plastic surgeon, Miki Sur, offered to perform the surgery for free, covering all costs. However, after examining Asel, he realized that plastic surgery alone would not be enough. She needs a series of operations to restore her organs before the reconstructive surgery can take place. The total cost of the surgeries is estimated to be at least $445,000. Asel's sister, Diana Yellen, is working to raise awareness and funds for the operation, which will take place in Turkey. So far, they have not yet raised even half of the needed $45,000, and there are additional expenses for accommodation, psychological support, rehabilitation, interpretation, medication, and more. Diana Yellen shared heartbreaking photos of her sister Asel, who was brutally attacked by her ex-husband, leaving her face severely disfigured. The doctors did everything they could to save her, but unfortunately, her ears and nose were beyond repair. Diana is outraged and frustrated with the judiciary of Kyrgyzstan, who allowed her sister's attacker to walk free on probation just a year ago. She believes that if the judge had made a stricter decision, Asel's ordeal could have been prevented. To raise awareness about domestic violence against women, Diana is organizing fundraising events to help her sister's recovery and rehabilitation. Asel, who has endured 12 years of abuse, dreams of opening a foundation to support women who have suffered similar traumas. Diana wants to spread a powerful message to women everywhere. Never tolerate abuse and do not expect your abuser to change. Instead, run away and never look back. The true ugliness lies not in Asel's disfigured face, but in the heart of her ex-husband, who committed this heinous act. Diana warns that if they cannot raise sufficient funds to support Asel's recovery, she will be forced to share her sister's graphic photos to shame the authorities into taking action. She appeals to every judge, policeman, and deputy to take a close look at Asel's face and remember the consequences of their inaction.